All right, what's going on? Drive time Tuesday afternoon. It is about 10 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. It's another nice day, nice December day. It's about 45 degrees and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, at our beautiful Broadway Media Studios. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass today on a Tuesday afternoon edition of the program as we look back on the weekend that was. Tuesday during the college football season means the release of the CFP rankings, which will take place tonight. BYU probably going to be in the top 20, but they are clearly on the outside looking in. But should they be? Should they at least be in consideration to be on the bubble? Nobody's saying they should be in. But some interesting numbers with BYU's resume that indicate maybe they're being a little bit undervalued, but the timing of those two losses obviously has killed their chances to advance to the CFP. It's college football championship weekend coming up starting on Friday and going throughout the course of the weekend. Don't forget, we are your home of the NFL in the market. We'll have all the CFP playoff games as well here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. If you're listening to us on the AM side of things, try us out on 92.1 FM. We got UNLV Boise State, Tulane, and Army on Friday to get things rolling. The weekend, I guess I'll call it the Thanksgiving weekend in pro football, came to a close last night with a surprisingly entertaining Monday Night Football game, the most Jameis Winston game ever, as Jameis Winston essentially set a record for passing yards for the Cleveland Browns and also threw 2 pick sixes. Broncos get the win 41-32. It was the return of Jerry Jeudy. He had 9 catches, 235 yards, and a touchdown against his former team. And the Broncos are firmly in position to maybe make the playoffs for the first time in a while. So the weekend of pro football now behind us, week 14 in the NFL. We'll get rolling on Thursday night with the Packers and the Lions. A good one from Ford Field in Detroit. Jared Goff, Jordan Love. So that'll be your Thursday NFL game to get week 14 going. Fantasy football playoffs probably upon you, so you might want to keep that in mind prior to the start of the season. College basketball has begun. We're going to lean into some college basketball coverage on the show throughout the course of the next few weeks. We're still kind of in college football mode. BYU is in action tonight. They're taking on Providence, 6:30 Mountain Time on FS1. Both BYU and Utah men's basketball off to a good start. So we'll do some college basketball coverage, of course, now that the football season for Utah certainly is behind us, and BYU left with their bowl game. The Utah Jazz hit a massive road trip tonight, and as a result of the NBA League Cup break, the Jazz don't play a home game until after Christmas. Tonight's their final NBA Cup match, but they're already eliminated. They're going to take on OKC on the road. But the Jazz aren't home until after Christmas because of that League Cup break, and they're not going to be a part of it. It's a big-time road trip. They're going to play their next 7 games on the road. Final road game will be on Thursday, December the 26th. They're going to return home on Saturday, December the 28th to take on Philadelphia. Then they've got Denver on New Year's Eve. Then they're back out on the road starting on New Year's Day. So a busy road schedule ahead for the Utah Jazz, who are a sparkling 4-16 on the season. Speaking of the Utah Jazz, Paul Millsap retired. Now, I've got to admit, I thought my man retired like 2 years ago. When I saw the news, I was like, yeah. But anyway, Paul Millsap, 4-time All-Star, one of the top 10 Jazz players of all time. Think about that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Could Paul Millsap be considered one of the top 10 Utah Jazz players of all time? Certainly a rookie that caught Jerry Sloan's eye that didn't happen very often. Ask Darren Williams. Paul was great here, and he had a hell of a career, made a lot of money. So shout out to Paul Millsap. Speaking of the Utah Jazz, Ron Harper caught the attention of Jazz fans today. Ron's son is one of these blue-chip prospects that's thought to be one of the top 3 or 4 players drafted, and a draft board had the Jazz drafting depending on how this goes down, but a draft board was released and a Jazz fan chimed in about the potential of Dylan Harper coming to Salt Lake City. And Ron Harper decided to take to his Twitter account to say there would be a trade. You remember once upon a time there were some rumblings that the Jazz were going to acquire Ron Harper, and he, like a number of other players, elected not to come here. Derek Harper, right? Ron Cycli. The names are long back in the day. So we'll do a little Jazz basketball, do a little NBA basketball on the show today. And, of course, one eye up on the hill for the Utah football program because it is a massive, massive time right now as the offseason for the Utes has begun. No official word on Coach Witt, no official word on the Utah offensive coordinator. We've got the signing period going on. Transfer portal window will officially open. It is smaller this year. It's down to 20 days, the transfer portal is. So we'll keep you up to date on any Utes that hit the portal. BYU got some rough news with a couple of players that are bouncing. We'll tell you who that is. As of right now, it's really Jalen Glover, who bounced before the season ended in the transfer portal for the Utes. So we will keep you up to date on any news that breaks on a number of different topics with Utah football that we're all very interested in. Utah Hockey Club had a great win against Vegas where they hung 6 goals on the Golden Knights, but they could not get it done against Dallas last night here in Salt Lake. They lose 2-1, your final score. They could never get that equalizing goal, but they put 35 shots on frame. They had 35 shots. They just could not find that tying goal. So the Utah Hockey Club continues kind of their up and down season. All right, good guest list on a Tuesday. We'll start things off with Kyle Bonagura, who covers college football for ESPN. Does a lot of their bowl projections. Kyle has BYU taking on Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. But, of course, with tonight being the CFP release, we'll get with Kyle about who he thinks is in, who he thinks is out, who's on the bubble, and what bowl season is going to look like. So we'll bring in Kyle today. NBA Daily Assist style with one of our favorites, Tim McMahon from ESPN. Band McMahon will drop by today to talk some Jazz basketball, some NBA basketball. Matt Brown, who writes Extra Points, one of my favorite college football newsletters, will stop by the program today. And then 2 Pelotons, 2 Emmys, Dave Fox. I'll be on TV with Dave tonight after the Jazz game. We call it Talking Jazz. So I'll be on TV with Dave tonight, 10:35, KMYU. Going to break down the start of the season for the Utah Jazz. We'll talk about the game tonight and get into early returns, the good, the bad, the ugly for the Utah Jazz. So Dave's going to stop by the program today on a Tuesday. Kyle Bonagura, Tim McMahon, Matt Brown, Dave Fox, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Tuesday. All right. So I've heard from a couple of different people, you included, and I've only been to one Utah Hockey Club game. It was the opener. Need to get back down there. Jam-packed. But it feels like the novelty may have worn off. And ultimately, in order for the Utah Hockey Club to find their footing in our market, they're either going to have to be really good right out of the gates like Vegas, or it's just going to take a lot of time. Does it feel like the novelty is starting to wear off a little bit?
From my perspective, there is a lot less attention on it now, social media-wise. I'm seeing less coverage. And to be completely frank, I went to a game in just before the holiday. It was still relatively, within the first 4 or 5 weeks of this hockey club, and there weren't many people there. So I do think that the novelty of a brand new team, a brand new sports franchise, wore off not only through the offseason a little bit, but again during this early part of the season. I think there's a way to recapture that, both with winning and with the rebrand or the initial branding, right? That's going to be part of this as well. But I definitely do feel like there was a fever pitch right at the beginning, and that didn't last, from my eyes, quite as long as I really expected it to.
Yeah, and look, we'll see. It's just going to take some time. I had a couple of buddies at the game last night, and they were texting me about the lack of attendance. The tickets are very expensive. The team's not very good, and it's early. But ultimately, an exciting thing for us to have another pro franchise here in our market. All right, Kyle Bonagura right out of the gates to do some college football on a Tuesday. But before we get to Kyle, courtesy of our good friends, and your good friends too, it's Standard Restaurant Supply. It's your one-stop shop for your tailgate. You can make your tailgate epic. Stop by their location at 3500 Southwest Temple or online at standardrestaurant.com. It is time now for your opening tip. Even though the Utes are done with the football season and BYU only has their bowl game left, there's still very much a lot of meat on the bone of college football topically right now, both locally and nationally. And as we've discussed over the course of the start of the week on the Utah football side of things, I just think it's pretty paramount for these decisions to come down really quickly. You want to get it right, but at this point in college football, when the transfer portal is upon us, signing day is upon us, and Utah early returns doing a good job of flipping some prospects and getting some infusion of talent. But the fact of the matter is, right now, it doesn't appear like Utah has the answer under center next year in the locker room. Now, we're all waiting on the Cameron Rising decision. No news on that front just yet. But it's interesting. I was talking to Sean about this during Crosstalk. I can't speak to this, but there are a lot of people up on the Hill who felt like the fact that Cam was coming back for this year took them out of the running for a lot of transfer portal quarterbacks they were interested in, because who wants to roll into town when you know you're going to be a backup if you think you're a starting caliber quarterback? So Noah Fafita has hit the transfer portal, Arizona quarterback. It was announced about an hour ago that Noah is now available for another team to go after. And I think if you're Utah, you got to make that phone call. Porter, Noah has some local ties. We were talking about this during the break. Now, obviously, this is just, we're speculating here, but there are some local ties for Noah Fafita as far as relatives that he has here and some people that have actually played in the program. It's not like he's unfamiliar with Utah football.
No, I mean, this is a guy who actually was recruited by Utah for quite some time. He has, as you mentioned, familial ties. You guys will remember the Fafitas, including really, really good defensive lineman and Stevie Fafita that played for Utah in 2004. In fact, that pick six streak we saw extended over the last couple of weeks, the maybe one glaring bright spot of this season, it was started by a defensive tackle named Steve Fafita. So there are some family ties and there are some connections here, and he's a guy that is familiar with the program. It's a natural, at least make the call, get him on campus, see if there's a potential match there. I'm with you with, maybe not thinking the answer is in the locker room. I don't know if that's necessarily the answer either, but it is a good option for a guy that's been productive at the D1 level.
Noah has 2 years left to play college football after a year this year that wasn't as – so he really burst on the scene his freshman year, and then obviously there was the situation where his head coach takes off to UW. He decided to stay at the University of Arizona, and ultimately – 2 years ago, we're talking about 73% completion, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a QBR of 165.9, an average about 9 yards per throw. Just elite numbers, not as good last year. Completion percentage down to 60%, still close to 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 12 picks, QBR down to 126.5. So obviously not reporting anything, but there is a model out there, Dan Lanning and others have utilized to grab a quarterback for 1 or 2 years out of the transfer portal that appears to have been successful. So these are just kind of the things we're going to be following topically. But ultimately, as I said earlier, the official word on Coach Witt, when is that going to come down? I'll repeat what I said yesterday. I do believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that those that are in the know already know and have already been told. I just can't imagine Kyle would put Morgan in a precarious situation or any of the coaches in a situation where they have to kind of wait and see what the deal is next season. And to me, that leads to a logical conclusion that he is coming back. I think if Kyle was going to ride off into the sunset, he has already decided that, and that announcement probably would have been made for the betterment of the program, ultimately only knowing the direction. I'm not saying it would be better for the program if Kyle left. He obviously is an elite head coach, and we want to see him coach here as long as he wants to coach. But that's got to be number one, to hear the official announcement. And then, of course, number two, we're still waiting to find out who the offensive coordinator is going to be, who's going to be calling the plays next year. And that obviously is paramount because you have to understand what the system is, and then you go after the talent you think would be the best schematic fit for said system. Ben Arbuckle, I think, was the apple of a lot of people's eyes around here. He ends up at Oklahoma. So nothing official as of now. Brendan Marion, UNLV, their offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. He had a really, really good year. He was with the University of Texas prior to Vegas. He's kind of a name that a lot of people are looking at. Mike Leftwich, Texas State offensive coordinator, is only 29. A lot of names out there but nothing official as of right now. And ultimately, I think that's got to be put into place. So for Utah football, the offseason questions, of course, what does the coaching staff look like when it's all settled? And what sort of talent can you add via the transfer portal or these incoming recruits as far as, what that will look like with the talent infusion in order to make sure last year was simply an anomaly and a moment in time as opposed to the new normal. Now, BYU still has a bowl game to play for. We're going to talk to Kyle Bonagura coming up on the other side, and ultimately Kyle and Mark Schleybaugh and others who do the projections have BYU in the Alamo Bowl taking on Colorado. Tonight will be the CFP release. I believe it's the fourth iteration of the CFP rankings. My guess will be BYU is going to be still in the top 20. They're not close to being considered either on the bubble or in, obviously. The Big 12 is going to be a one-bid league, and they were yelling at us all season long that was the deal. And when the first rankings came out and BYU at undefeated was all the way down at 9, I think that indicated that there was not going to be any path for this conference to get 2 in. Now, Arizona State is the favorite coming up this weekend against Iowa State to win. So as of now, Arizona State, according to most models, is going to be in probably as the 12 seed. What does the committee do with Alabama? How close is a hypothetical Iowa State to the top 12? What about the ACC, Clemson? I do think SMU, they're favored to win. They're a top 10 team. BYU has and win. BYU's strength of schedule is 44. They've got 2 wins against ranked opponents. Like, there is a argument to be made that BYU's resume is on par with an Ole Miss or a Tennessee or a Bama, right? But ultimately, I never am surprised that when tie goes to the runner type scenario presents itself, the big brand gets the benefit of the doubt because, as we talk about on this show all the time, this is not just a CFP committee. This is the people behind the scenes who run the business. And yes, very powerful television executives that only want the most people possible to watch their TV show. And so they will petition for an Alabama, even with 3 losses. So we'll see what they do with Bama, some of these 3-loss teams. I think the top 4 seeds are pretty easy. It's Oregon, Texas, SMU, and probably Boise State, should they get the win. First-round matchups, Tennessee. What do they do with Ohio State after losing to Michigan as a 21-point favorite, the 4th straight L for Ohio State against Michigan? Who does Arizona State play, or the Big 12 champ, Arizona the favorite, so we'll just slide them in. Who do they play round 1? Penn State maybe? Notre Dame maybe? What does the committee do with Miami? It feels like Indiana is more or less a lock. Georgia's going to be in as well. But I think Miami's an interesting one. I think Alabama is an interesting one. Clemson, Ole Miss, South Carolina. We talked to Spencer Hall about this yesterday. And Group of 5, it really comes down to who wins the Mountain West. It's Boise State or UNLV. But even though Utah is done, and even though BYU only has their bowl game, college football is still very topical when it comes to all the chaos that still could continue to ensue. It's been a crazy college football season, and my guess is it continues coming up on Saturday. All right, speaking of college football, one of our favorites, Kyle Bonagura, leads off on a Tuesday, coming up next right here on ESPN 700. I'm very, very aware. I did a little look-see during the break. I'm not sure that I could put Millsap top 10.
No?
I don't think so.
Top 10 moments for sure.
See, both of them Carlos Boozer. See, that's not the line right there.
The hard part with Paul is that he probably had his best years right after he was a Jasmine.
Yeah.
He showed what he was going to be and showed what he could be, but it was only kind of a taste of it here.
Kyle Boozer, give me top 10 Jazz players of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I really have to put my foot down here. When you're talking top 10 Jazz players and Paul Millsap, I put a lot of thought into that. And I think he's clearly top 12, but to go beyond that is really, that's a stretch.
See, I knew we'd get a hot take from Bonnegar about the top 10 Jazz players of all time. Nobody cares. We can move on. All right, Kyle, since you and I last spoke, the season came to an end for the University of Utah at 5-7, 2-7 in conference, 7 straight L's. So we're sitting here this week wondering when the announcement will come about the official status of Coach Witt and then the new offensive coordinator as well. And obviously, I'm not going to ask you, whether or not you think Kyle's going to come back, but I will ask you just from a timing standpoint with things like signing day and the transfer portal opening, how paramount is it for the program to come to a decision very quickly on what the coaching staff is going to look like next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously important, right? But I would also kind of hedge that a little bit because, like, when you do have the coach in waiting kind of deal going on, I think the overall staff probably, like, if Kyle decides to retire, I think the bulk of the staff probably looks pretty similar. The look and feel of the program will be pretty similar, right? I think you're kind of less, likely to lose players you might have kept, and all of those factors are a lot different than you're deciding on. The question is if you're moving on to a completely new staff, right? And so, yeah, it's important, but that's the other side of things that makes it kind of less important than other programs that might have been in a similar situation.
So a lot of people around here were hoping that Utah would be able to convince Ben Arbuckle to join the staff as the OC. He goes to Oklahoma, obviously after a really good run up on the Palouse. What's your reaction to Ben Arbuckle taking his talents down to the Sooners?
So I watched a lot of WC this year, and I think Arbuckle's got a bright future. I don't think he's like a savior for anyone, really. I mean, we're talking about an offense that just scored 14 points against 2-9 Wyoming to end the season, right? With in game number 12. So this is like the WSU offense got worse as the season went along, not better. And so there's a lot to like about their total numbers from the season, but I think it kind of got a little stale there at the end. So yeah, he's a good coach with a bright future, but I think you can find someone who's kind of in that same tier that gives you a chance to improve just the same.
One of the names that's making the round down here is Brennan Marion from UNLV. You have any thoughts on that or any other thoughts on who Utah could look at potentially for this offensive coordinator hire?
So he's interesting, right? Because, you talk about coach in waiting at Utah. Well, if Barry Odom leaves UNLV, which is certainly possible, I think he's a guy that could slide into the role and become the head coach there at UNLV, right? And so, I would be, if you can get him, I think he would be an immediate upgrade. Look, I think it's exciting what they've done there. And the fact that they were able to have immediate success when you jumped in, or immediate improvement, I should say, is really appealing, right? Because that's what you're looking for at Utah, right? You're not looking for someone who can kind of grow into the job. You want immediate results next year to kind of pair with the defense, as is shown, even as the ups and downs of the current offensively. It's been pretty consistent for years. So yeah, look, there's so many names you can kind of throw out there that are intriguing, right? And they're all they all represent some degree of optimism compared to what things are right now. So yeah, the sooner they can get that name in, the better. I think it helps with, that's probably more important than anything is knowing what the offense is going to look like, so you can hit that transfer market looking for, whoever's going to come in and plug into those spots you're looking for.
Found out about an hour ago via an announcement that Noah Fafita has hit the transfer portal, and Noah's uncle Steve played for the University of Utah. He has local ties. And look, Kyle, I don't know what's going to happen with Cam. We still haven't heard an announcement about the potential of him coming back for an 8th season. As I have talked to you about and others, I feel like this is just one of those good, not great marriages where you had some good years, but maybe one wants to travel, the other took a job in a different state. You give each other a hug, you say best of luck, and you go your separate ways. I feel like most fans are on that page as well, but ultimately it's up to Cam and it's up to the staff what they want to do. But if Cam doesn't come back, I just don't think the answer under center is in the quarterback room right now. I mean, maybe Isaac can grow into that. Maybe Brandon Rose is better than any of us have seen so far. But do you think there's a potential for the University of Utah football program to at least make an inquiry about whether or not Noah Fifita wants to play his final 2 years of football here in Salt Lake?
I think he's the guy you have to reach out to. If you're Utah, regardless, independent of Cam's decision or whatever, you still have to go pursue a guy who you think has a chance to compete to win the job and kind of help elevate the offense. So yeah, Fifita. This year was a disappointment for sure. I mean, especially after the momentum that they had built at the back end of last season, for them to fall flat, in such an embarrassing way, right? Was for me really surprising. I was down in Tucson before the year started. Sat with Noah for a while. Sat with Brent Brennan. It seemed like they were on the same page and believed in kind of each other and what the future looked like. And so, yeah, that was for me, a puzzling season, maybe more than Utah, to be honest, because there wasn't really a logical explanation for why things turned south as quickly as they did and as poorly as they did. But yeah, I don't think his talent is in question. I think he's a guy that, heightens, raises the ceiling for what this team could be.
So the most popular pick during the preseason in Vegas for the Big 12 championship matchup was Utah and Oklahoma State, who combined to go 2-16 in conference. Oklahoma State did not win a conference game. My question to you, Kyle, is do you believe both Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy will be back on the sidelines for their respective teams next year?
That's a good question. I would say there's a few combinations to play with there, right? I haven't monitored the Gundy stuff as closely, but I haven't seen anything that's really speculating that he's looking to move on. I think if anything, he was pretty forceful and that they'll get it fixed, right? So that really kind of brings you back to whether Kyle's going to stay or go. And I don't have any insight into whether it's more likely or not likely to happen, I suppose. But I would say, from a personal standpoint, I would like to see him back just because it just feels like he deserves to have a more memorable year to go out on. And the reasons for their poor season, a lot of that was just felt like it was out of his hands, right? The injuries were, for the second year in a row, unfair, I guess. I mean, life's unfair, but I think you know what I'm saying. And so to kind of get him a real crack at going out in a way that he's more deserving, I think it would just feel like a better end. But at the same time, if he's going through this and going through all the changes in the sport and he's tired, and it's look, I've had enough. I think that would be perfectly understandable as well.
All right, off Utah now over to BYU. Ultimately their two losses with how untimely they were, they've eliminated Brigham Young from any chance of being in the CFP. And look, we all felt like the Big 12 was going to be a one-bid league. I held out a little hope that maybe there could be some separation and maybe we would have an undefeated BYU against a one-loss Iowa State or whatever. And then maybe in that scenario, there's room for an at-large bid. But BYU's resume overall, Kyle, isn't bad. I mean, they have the 44th strength of schedule, which is better than a lot of the teams ahead of them. They have a couple of ranked wins. They're going to have a top 10 win with SMU. Just generally speaking, tonight when the CFP rankings are released, where do you think we find BYU? Top 20-ish, thereabouts?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're 15 maybe is even possible because what were they 19th last week?
Yeah.
And then so you could jump up. You win a game. I'm sure there was some losses ahead of them that don't have immediate recall on. But yeah, anywhere from 15 to 15, 16, 17 in there feels about right. And 10-2 in the regular season. I think it's some of they were fortunate in a few of those wins along the way, but I think at the end of the day, right, you are what your record is. And last year, maybe they were a little bit better than the 5-7 they finished with. And, but that's what they were. They were a 5-7 team, just like Utah's a 5-7 team. And so, 10-2, that's, you exceeded expectations, right? I think what's interesting about, the way BYU's season played out is that, look, you came in with, tempered expectations about what the year could be. The preseason polls had them, second tier or second half of the conference. He obviously exceeded that clearly right away. But then when you win 9 games to start the year, then you start getting excited, right? Oh, playoffs seem very likely at that point. And so for them to be sitting at 9-0 and to finish 10-2, then it kind of changes how the season feels. It feels probably right now like a little bit of a disappointment that they're not in the mix to win the conference, to go to the playoff. But it's also like if you're able to reset time and ask BYU fans how they would feel about a 10-2 season in August, they would have been thrilled about it, right? So it's strangely disappointing while significantly exceeding expectations.
One more local question, then we'll expand to some other topics with our remaining few moments, Kyle. I wonder, because one of the narratives going on around here is what will Utah football look like year 2 in the Big 12, with year 1 as kind of like a landing spot, learning curve. You know, year 1 for BYU wasn't great, but they were close in a lot of games. And that was kind of their whole thing. Like, hey, we're not far off. We just need a couple of plays to go our way. And the couple of plays more often than not went their way this year. And they turn around year 2 in the Big 12 the way that Utah football is hoping to turn around year 2 in the Big 12. But the caveat here is Utah had a decade in P5 football, then P4 football now in the Pac-12. So I think, well, I'll just speak for myself. I thought their transition into the Big 12 was going to be more seamless because BYU spent a decade independent. They weren't a P4 program, P5 program, so the P4 thing was new to them in a way that it should not have been new to Utah. But do you believe there is a natural learning curve and a potential for Utah to up the ante a bit after learning in year 1 and hopefully improving year 2 the way BYU did?
Yes, I don't think so, and I actually feel pretty strongly about this. I don't think that there's really, like, the learning curve thing makes much sense to me because, I mean, look, Colorado and Arizona State were the 2 worst teams in the Pac-12 last year, and they were, you know, if BYU had lost on Saturday, they would have been playing for the Big 12 title, right? And so I think that shows that, you know, you can make the move and be fine in year 1. Like, it doesn't necessarily – like, years don't carry over in college football like they did before the transfer portal, like, you know, like NIL, like all these factors make it so you can basically reset every year, right, and recalibrate expectations and take significant jumps forward where your team is not as, like, it's not similar to the year before in a way that just didn't exist in college football in previous eras, like even 3 years ago, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, look, at BYU, there's a little bit of that, right, just learning the opposition and stuff. But, like, I don't think any of those factors are so significant that are, like, you know, they're going to push you. They're going to have such an influence on success year to year. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And well said. And I tend to agree with you. I just think right now Ute fans are really hoping and praying that this season was a moment in time and not the new normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I don't think anything about their success or lack of success this year had anything to do with moving conferences. I think they were going to be, you know, screwed regardless of if the Pac-12 still existed or if they're in the Big 12. I think just like the injuries were the injuries, and when you can't get a first down consistently, you're not going to win a lot of football games, right? And so I think for Utah this year, I really do think it's that simple. Like, if you don't have a good offense, you're not going to win games regardless of where you're at. Their defense was still a top 15, top 20 defense in college football. But, you know, I think Kyle's even said it, you know, quarterback's the most important position in team sports. And if you're getting, you know, well below average quarterback play on balance for your season, it's like any sort of reasons and explanations for why you're having or not having success are pretty irrelevant. You just have to have that one piece before anything else even matters.
Is there a Kyle Bonagura hot take as to why the majority of Pac-12 teams struggled in their new obviously, Oregon's the exception. Arizona State has looked good as well. Colorado's a bit improved. But for the most part, the Pac-12 teams, when they went elsewhere, Big 10, Big 12, et cetera, just weren't able to really find their footing quickly. Any thoughts as to potentially why that is?
Yeah, I don't think there's like a theme that you can kind of attribute it to, because I do think like each of those there's like specific reasons that's very much about like where their program is at, right? I don't think the conference would have been very good had it existed untouched. But I will say this, they were like the Pac-12 teams, like by and large did poorly, but you know, there's 4 power conferences and there could be 2 of those could be from the former Pac-12. So that is something to speak to the quality of the league. That was the Pac-12's problem for so long, right? Like, they just didn't have the teams at the top. They had so many good teams from 5 to 20 in the rankings every year, where they was always very deep, and obviously parity was there. They just never had those elite teams, and now you have these two teams that could be in the playoffs as Power 4 conference champions in Arizona State and Oregon potentially, which is just kind of a fun twist of irony as conference realignment continues to impact the sport. I
do need to ask you one more question regarding the local stuff, because your bowl projections has Brigham Young in the Alamo Bowl against Colorado. Do you feel like that's the deal? Do you think that's what it's going to be? And if not, what are the other options for BYU as they're bowl bound?
Yeah, so I feel pretty good about BYU being in the Alamo Bowl. Colorado is interesting because like the Pac-12, like the old Pac-12 teams are actually supposed to go with the old bowl affiliations. So Colorado is actually supposed to go to an old Pac-12 bowl. But like now, do they want them to play against a team from their current conference? It gets a little bit tricky. Cal's got some ACC potential matchups, but yeah, BYU. I think BYU will be there. It's just a matter of who it'll be against, and that'll probably come back and I'll look bad, but that's just kind of the nature of bowl projections.
So what I have in front of me, Kyle, is that Lincoln Riley's buyout is $90 million, which is just, and I don't know if that's accurate. That's just what a Google search popped up. Do you think there's legitimate noise around him after Southern Cal stumbled so badly? I mean, that's a big check to write, but we've seen institutions do it before.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are legitimately pissed. I don't know if there's enough legitimately upset people who are going to contribute to a $90 million buyout in a meaningful way. I think I just don't see any way that ends right now unless it's him pulling the trigger. Like, we've seen it before, but it's such a big number. And like, just because Texas A&M did it with Jimbo, and you got to be a little bit loony to spend your kind of discretionary money on buying out a coach when it gets to that level.
What's the first thing you would do if you got a $90 million buyout?
I mean, you would just never hear from me again. It would be like I vanished off the face of the earth. Nothing. I would have no internet presence. I mean, I would have a lot of like extravagant houses all over the world that I would cease to exist as far as the general population is concerned.
That was exactly my answer, and it broke my family's heart. They were so sad. I'm very sorry, but that's exactly what would happen. All right. Any big time jobs you think will be open? Obviously, every year there's things that we don't see coming, but if it's not Southern Cal, do you think there are any marquee jobs that could come available this offseason?
That's a good question, and one I haven't thought a whole lot of. But I think like the wild card is always what happens with the NFL, right? If like an NFL team plucks away a big time coach, and we won't know that until late in the cycle, right? Because just the way the kind of carousel turns. I mean, the one that everyone wants to talk about, and I feel like a little bit of a contrarian on this, is Ohio State. And Ryan Day just not being able to beat Michigan is such a big deal, and people are so pissed at him there because of that. But I don't know. The guy's like 45-6 or something like that in the conference over the last 4 years, and yeah, they're all against Michigan, and that's bad. But I just have a hard time seeing the logic in firing a guy at that, who's winning at that clip. Like, it just, for me, is there's so many programs in the country that would be beyond thrilled to have the type of success that Ohio State's had. And yeah, look, they ran into a time where Michigan was on the upswing. This year is obviously there's not much of an excuse for it, but at the same time, now Ohio State's in a place where they're not going to play in the conference championship game, get a little bit of take a step back, and they're a no doubt playoff team. They might even host a playoff game. So the idea that you should fire a coach who just guided your team to like a home playoff game and like has a chance to really make a run, like that feels weird to me. But he's obviously the name that gets a lot of attention in terms of guys whose jobs might be in jeopardy.
Couple of CFP ranking-related questions, and I'll set you loose. What do you think the committee does with Miami after that loss over the weekend to Syracuse?
That's really the only thing that I'm interested in tonight is where does Miami end up with that cohort of Ole Miss and Alabama and who's the other one? South Carolina. Because those four teams, I think, if you kind of run through the exercise, which I've done, like that's the decision that needs to be made if there's a chalk, results in the conference championship games. Meaning basically if SMU beats Clemson, those are the teams that are, be decided. And I think I don't think there's really precedent for like them changing the order of those four with none of them playing this week. So I think whoever is ahead of who's ever at the top among those four tonight is probably going to be the team that gets in. If SMU loses to Clemson, then they kind of they enter the mix too, and it's a little bit like a little trickier. But yeah, I think it's tough. There's not. For me, Miami is really fortunate that it beat Virginia Tech on a reversal of a decision on the Hail Mary, and then the game against Cal, it was clear targeting that didn't get called. Cal should have won that game, and if that one call is made, Cal wins the game. So like they're fortunate to be in that position, anyways. Like, well, look, they're 10-2, and people are going to look at that, and you're not going to look in those decisions in the same way, I guess, as their wins at the end of the day. But the other three SEC teams all have very similar resumes with just quality wins. But you also lose 3 games too, and so there's going to be the kind of how do you make the case that you deserve to have a shot at the national title when you've lost 3 times? No sympathy for any of those teams, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, do you think Bama? Where do you think Bama? Before I say you lose, where do you think we see Bama tonight?
I feel like Bama's probably going to be top of the list of those 4.
Yeah,
I think there's an earned bias, right? When you're so good for so long, they see the brand, and it impacts it impacts how people evaluate teams, and whether that's fair or not is certainly a different conversation. But I think that is a factor, and will probably play a role tonight.
All right, man. Appreciate the time, Kyle. Have a good week. We'll chat soon, okay?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Our buddy Kyle Bonaguro covers college football for ESPN, does all their bowl projections along with Schleybaugh. He has BYU in the Alamo Bowl against Colorado coming up on Saturday, December the 28th. There is a movement in Boulder to decline that invite. I don't know why. It's a fine bowl game. Like if you're not in the CFP, if you're not in the 12-team CFP, neighborhood, most of these bowl games aren't necessarily relevant anyway, but it's a decent payout. BYU's a good brand. Colorado, of course, with Deion brings a lot of eyes. I'm cheering for that. I think it would be a cool outcome for BYU. All right, we're going to switch gears. We're going to do some jazz and some NBA with Tim McMahon from ESPN coming up next. But before we catch a break, got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars of awarded winnings. Now, here's the deal. If you've never tried gambling on sports, you don't have to worry about the spread and the over-under and the money line. This is very simple. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So last night, Jameis Winston, more or less 250 yards, obviously more. Nick Chubb, more or less 1.5 touchdowns. It's very simple. And if you knock 2 picks out, you actually win real money. So it's very easy to do. They're giving away free money. You might as well go grab that and see if you like it. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Keep it right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Going to bring in Matt Brown from Extra Points today. We'll get back to some college football conversation prior to championship weekend starting on Friday. Dave Fox will join us later on. I'll be on TV with Dave tonight after the Jazz game. The Jazz are taking on the Thunder in the NBA Cup, but the Jazz have been eliminated. Let's bring in our next guest to talk some Jazz, some NBA. He is Tim McMahon on a Tuesday. Tim, happy Tuesday, brother. How we doing?
Howdy, partner. I wasn't sure you still had this show. I haven't talked to you in a while. You okay?
I'm good. I took a little time off for Thanksgiving. Were you able to spend the holidays with your family? I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah, I was able to get Thanksgiving at home.
Good.
Nice. For certain, the NBA does everybody a favor by taking Thanksgiving off, and fortunately, I was not in a hotel room that night. So yes. Very good.
Good stuff. Well, great to have you on here, and great to reconnect. I want to ask you a question that came up on the show yesterday. Your mentor Andy Larson joined us on the program yesterday.
Hold on, I'm about to choke. Oh, whoa! That caught me off guard. Okay, go on.
So Andy lays it on me yesterday that, in his opinion, of the 6 either first or second year players, Kyle Filipowski is the most promising. And I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm saying that's a bad sign if that's the case. What's the Tim McMahon take?
Okay, so is Taylor Hendricks included in that?
Yes.
So I would go with Hendricks, and obviously we're not going to have any further evidence of whether I'm right or wrong on that for a while. Hopefully he'll be back to begin next season. That's not a certainty even. But look, the fact that Hendricks was in the starting lineup, was getting the toughest defensive assignment regardless of position before he got hurt, I would say would be encouraging. I think you could definitely argue that Filipowski was the most NBA ready of those guys. I don't know that he's got the ceiling maybe that some of the other guys do, but listen, I understand maybe having some doubts about Keontae George. We're a season and a quarter into his career, and he's shooting in the 30s. That's tough. He's turning the ball over a lot, all those kind of things. And frankly, like Cody Williams, I just made the mistake of looking up his G League numbers, and it's only been 2 games, but it's not pretty. It's not encouraging. Yeah, and that is an issue. When you have a rebuilding team that's loaded with young players, you're hoping to see progress and development in those young guys, and certainly you can argue that you haven't seen as much as you'd like.
So what's fair to say about Cody right now? It's so early and he's so young, and it just feels so premature to make any sort of either reductive or over-the-top statement on who he is now or who he can become. But look, what's fair to say about a top 10 pick that is in the G League, and when he had a chance with the varsity, it didn't look good. The G League is there for development. Rudy spent some time there as a rookie.
Sure.
Other players have spent time there as a rookie. But when it's your top 10 pick, I think for the fan base, it lands a little bit differently, if that makes sense, Tim. What are your thoughts on that?
I think what's fair to say is the guy clearly was not ready for the NBA and needs to spend significant time playing in the G League this season. The reason he was a lottery pick is because of potential. It's not like he was extraordinarily productive even at Colorado, but the length, the athleticism, some of the playmaking skills that he's exhibited at that size, that sort of a thing. But I agree with you. The last thing you want, the guy's 20 years old, physically very raw still. In terms of his physique hasn't developed, those sort of things. Look, it was ugly in the NBA. His first couple games in the G League have been ugly. But you've got to have some patience with a 20-year-old kid.
For sure. And that leads me to Keontae, as you referenced earlier, 21, just turned 21, so still very young. But the whole idea that Kyle Filipowski could potentially be the most exciting of these 6 players is an indictment on Keontae more than anything else, because he's had the most opportunities to learn and grow. You referenced the shooting splits. They were bad in college. They were bad as a rookie. They're even worse now. Over the past 6 games, he's had 5 turnovers in 4 of them or more. So it's not just bad shots. It's not taking care of the basketball. I just wonder, he's either miscast him or it's time to be very concerned about his NBA future. And again, 21, right? So we have to pump the brakes on all of it. But is it time to ask questions about whether or not he can play lead guard, or should they try something? I don't know. I just know it hasn't looked good enough so far with Keontae.
Well, you say is it time to ask questions? Like, that's been a question the whole time.
Yeah.
I think maybe the way to phrase that is, do we have answers? Do you have definitive answers? And again, I still think that's early. And look, would he be getting this many minutes as a point guard? If he was drafted during the Donovan Rudy era, of course not, right? But this is a complete rebuild. If it's really bad this year, you know what? In a way, that's kind of good, in the sense of you want to be at the top of this lottery. To pull the plug on what has always been an experiment with him as a point guard, right now, I think would be pretty short-sighted. But am I saying that, hey, you've got to be committed to Keontae George as your lead guard for the future going forward? No, of course not. He obviously has a lot to prove, and frankly, at this point in his career, hadn't proven it yet. And hey, the answer for him, he might end up being the shooting stuff is a little bit scary too. I don't know how much of that is having everything else on his plate in terms of trying to organize the offense, et cetera, et cetera. But he might just be a guy who's a off the bench scorer type of dude. That's okay.
Like Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson. There's and there are reports, and who knows, man. It's the day and age of, wait, is this real or not? The intrawebs and such. I tend to listen to guys like you and Windhorse and people that are plugged in, Dave and such. But there already are reports out there about Clarkson, Sexton, and Collins specifically, as far as Danny and Justin potentially being willing to move them. And I'm a little bit conflicted, Tim, because part of me believes this team is built perfectly to be awful, which is the deal. And I've been a supporter of this approach and somebody who wanted this approach a couple of years ago when Wembanyama was available. So I have no issue with them losing. They could lose every game this year. I'd be fine with it because I understand the situation. So you have a vet in John Collins that has played pretty well this year for the Jazz, but he's like the perfect $25 million vet if you just want to lose. And, Clarkson hasn't been the same player in a couple of years only because he's older. I think there are teams that would be interested in Colin Sexton. So your thoughts on that, though, like the juxtaposition of maybe this team is built perfectly to lose a lot, or whether or not you do want to continue to shed some vets to maybe continue to stockpile some draft capital.
Of course they're willing to trade those guys. I mean, they've been willing to trade them. They were willing to trade them over the summer. What they're not willing to do is attach any sort of assets to get off of them. Like it's not like they're trying to run those guys out of town. They're good dudes, or the kind of guys that you want around young players. It's not like it's any kind of a toxic situation by any stretch. They're great guys to have in a locker room and an organization. All very pleasant personality types. But hey, if they can get some kind of value for those guys, absolutely they're available. Now, and if they trade those guys, the goal obviously isn't, hey, we've got to get better right now. It's trying to add to the collection of assets that they have moving forward. And again, I can understand the frustration probably from some folks in the fan base that feels like this is year 3 of the rebuild. Like, when's it going to start to turn a corner? I think internally they really look at it as this is year 1 of the full-blown commitment to a rebuild. The last couple of years we've seen it. They were too good for their own good. They were Brooklyn Netsing it. That's what, Jordy Fernandez, what he's doing right now, very similar to year 1 Will Hardy. Great news is you've got a good young coach. He's proven that. Bad news is you're too good for your own good, and the Nets will make a midseason pivot and probably not be bad enough to end up at the top of the lottery, just like the Jazz were the last couple of years.
So it hasn't been all bad, Tim, and I actually think Walker Kessler early on has because he's year 3 under Will. He's the only player because they traded the other, Ochai and such. So year 3 under Will Hardy, I've been very, very curious and paid close attention to Walker, and I think across the board he's been better. Missed a few games here or there with some injuries, but he's back. And ultimately, I think a question that we all have out here and people that cover the Jazz have is, besides Lowry, who's going to be around when this team is good again? And the kids are so young. We have no definitive answer with them. And I feel like Walker so far has played himself into the equation that maybe he's here for the long haul. What stands out most to you about what I perceive to be a very strong start of the season for Walker Kessler?
I think what really stands out is the way he responded to what was a disappointing sophomore season, right? The guy was, on Rookie of the Year ballots his first year out of, was the first-team all-rookie guy, and then ends up on Team USA for the World Cup. In hindsight, it was a mistake for him to be part of that. It didn't do him any good. He had a rough year last year, in terms of just the expectations that he would build on that strong rookie season. Didn't really happen. During his exit interview, I know Will was very direct with him. They mapped out exactly what needed to happen for Walker to, get his career back on the trajectory that everybody wants it to be on. And Walker listened to every word, and he responded exactly how you would want. Look, the guy had started a ton of games and was playing in the Salt Lake City Summer League. You don't see that happen for guys going in their third year, but that's what Will laid out for him in terms of part of his developmental process for the summer, and he bought into it. He went back to Georgia. He clearly worked his butt off in the weight room, worked on his game, and he came back much stronger, much more prepared. And, Kessler can be part of a winning franchise for sure. A lot of teams thought maybe you could get him at a bargain price this summer. Obviously the Knicks were one of the teams that tried. But if Walker Kessler's not in Utah, the Jazz are going to get quite a price in return. He absolutely fits as part of the future once this rebuild starts paying dividends.
I'll admit that I thought Paul Millsap retired a couple of years ago, so I was a little caught off guard at the announcement today. But, it's just kind of fun to reminisce about Paul's years here. He was a rookie who caught Jerry Sloan's eye, which was hard to do. You can ask Darren Williams about that. Probably played his best NBA ball after he left here and, landed in Atlanta in Denver. But, ultimately, I don't know where he falls on, the all-time Jazz rank, but probably a top 15 player in the history of the Utah Jazz. I just wondered, as a guy who covered him after 16 seasons, 4 All-Star appearances, Paul Millsap officially hangs it up. What's the Tim McMahon take on his career?
Yeah, and listen, it's one of these – he announced his retirement today. The vast majority of players get retired, right?
Right.
They can't catch on a roster, and that's clearly what happened to him, and he's kind of acknowledged, okay, it's done. Heck of a career, especially for a mid-second round pick. I mean, really a phenomenal career. You just laid out the credentials, made a ton of money, was widely respected throughout the league. Top 15 player in Jazz history. Wow, I'd have to really look into that. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, we were kicking this around earlier. I mean, and look, I'm including the years that he spent elsewhere. Just, the top players that spent time here. Not just his time here, Tim. But when you look at the list, I mean, when you get past the obvious, you get down to, at 10, you get a guy like Jeff Hornacek or Carlos Boozer, Darryl Griffith. Lowry's probably playing his way on the list. Then there's Hayward, Gordon Hayward, Thurl Bailey. I don't know that he's top 15 for sure, but he's not far out when you kind of look at the totality of his NBA career.
Okay, when you talk about the totality of his career, I thought you meant top 15 as far as production in a Jazz uniform.
Yeah.
You got to have Adrian Dantley pretty high on that list then.
Oh, for sure. For sure, yeah.
I mean, what's he, right after Stockton and Malone?
It depends on what you want to do with, Maravich, right? Darren Williams, Gobert, Rudy's got to be on the list, but yeah, I think
Donovan's obviously rising, but
yeah,
boy, that's a sensitive conversation.
No. Actually, speaking of which, are we seeing, like I asked you early when they came out of the gates on fire, but I watched that entire Cavs-Celtics game the other day, and ultimately Donovan has questions to answer in the spring, and he knows it, and we all know it who have watched him and have covered him. But are we potentially seeing maybe Donovan in, year 6, year 7, maybe figuring out a way to level up with what he's done, and this Cavs team clearly being a team that people need to pay attention to out east?
I think we're seeing Donovan healthy, and I think we're seeing the pieces around him leveling up more than like Donovan last year when he was healthy. He was pretty amazing.
Yep.
Donovan's put up some pretty impressive numbers throughout the course of his career. Last year, there was too much of a toll on him physically. His knee, I think it's related to his knee issues. But Garland's playing a lot better. I think Mobley's improved. They've figured out some things rotationally to help those pieces fit. And listen, man, the Cavs are going to be a threat as long as they don't have to run into the Atlanta Hawks in the 1-8 game, the 2-7 series rather, because that's like the one team they cannot beat.
Yeah, Quinn coach Donovan. I don't know if you knew that.
There you go.
Deep research. Yeah, deep research for you, Tim. All right, the other ex-Jazz man, obviously, who was jettisoned off for a bunch of draft capital is Rudy Gobert. And look, the returns, Tim, start coming the Jazz way for the Gobert and Mitchell trades, and it has not looked good for Minnesota so far. How real do you think these struggles are, and do you think they're going to last throughout the course of the year? Could the Jazz actually luck into maybe a better pick than we thought they would from the T-Wolves?
Well, I think could they luck into a better pick? Yes. And as deep as the West is, listen, there's going to be a few pretty good teams that don't make the playoffs. So not out of the realm of possibility they could even luck into a lottery pick. I would say it's pretty unlikely, though. Obviously, there's been some struggles with the T-Wolves. Ant had his very headline-making post-game discussion with the media where he kind of called everything out. They've responded since then. They just whooped the Lakers' butt up and down. And, the one thing that Ant said, there were a lot of things that were kind of splashy and, kind of caught your ear. But I thought the most important thing that he said was our identity is being a dominant defensive team, and we haven't done that. We've got to get back to that. And they have done that since he made those comments, since they've ended this losing streak. And, he's exactly right. The Wolves were in contention for the number one seed in the West all last season and then went on a run to the Western Conference Finals because they were the best defensive team in the league. They were a mediocre offensive team last year. They're a mediocre offensive team right now. Problem is they haven't been a top 10 defense, much less one of the best defenses in the league. And so, I do believe they're going to be a drastically improved defensive team than they were for the first, 20 games of the season.
Give me your thoughts on the recent stretch from the Spurs. Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, vets that have won at a very high level. I don't think they won 3 straight until March of last year. They've rattled off 7 of 10. And I believe they had just won 4 straight. And Wembanyama obviously continues to do things that we've never seen before. I'm not saying that, they're going to be a threat to anybody up top, but are they at least a little bit ahead of schedule? And is that recent play something that teams need to pay attention to?
Well, I know you're a big listener of the Hoop Collective.
Of course.
So you know that I've been bullish on the Spurs. I've got a bet with Tim Bontemps, and I forget what the actual number is because I always try to lower it. I think the over-under was 35.5 wins. I took the over. We've got a dinner bet on that. And it wasn't complicated. My thought process is Wendy is a generational talent, and when he had a competent point guard on the floor with him last year, they actually had a plus net rating. The problem was they only had a solid backup caliber point guard in Trey Jones. With Chris Paul, who, say what you want about the disposition, all that, he's a perfect veteran leader for that team. And Harrison Barnes, a phenomenal guy to have in the locker room and on the floor, another highly competent veteran. The Spurs are going to be a solid team. A playoff team, probably not, but, could they go 500? That's certainly within the realm of possibility. And obviously the projection on the Spurs making that kind of a leap, yes, it's about bringing in the veterans and, the leadership and the competency and all that. It's also about just anticipating that Victor, after being the Rookie of the Year, was going to make a leap. He's going to be Defensive Player of the Year if he stays healthy, and there's a pretty good chance he's going to make an All-NBA team. I mean, he's just an incredible talent. We can nitpick the shot selection, which I think is fair and is a long discussion to have. But we've never seen anything like this guy. And I tell you what, man, Stephon Castle, their high lottery pick, the numbers aren't necessarily pretty at this point, but that dude helps you win games. They've hit on one there for sure.
Yeah, I wanted the Jazz to potentially make a move for that, but it didn't happen. I loved him coming out of school. All right, usually when we ask you about a team in Texas, it's Dallas because you cover them and do a great job. But I got to ask you about Houston. So ultimately, I'll kind of ask you the same question because we are at the 20-game mark, and Thanksgiving is a benchmark for front offices in pro basketball to kind of analyze what they have. And Ime Udoka obviously has done a great job. How real do you think this start is, as they're currently the 2 seed in the West, right behind OKC, who they just beat?
Yeah, and I actually was at that game and spent some time in the Rockets facility yesterday. They got a shiny new facility, really nice place. Got a tour there. Look, are they going to probably end up as a top 2 team, top 4 team in the West this year? It's unlikely. But I'll tell you this, they are a damn good defensive team, and that is Ime Udoka, and that is, having dudes like Amin Thompson and Tari Eason coming off the bench. Like, Dylan Brooks is just beating on you and breathing in your face and harassing you. He checks out, and you think you get to catch your breath, and you see Thompson and freaking Eason checking in. My goodness. Van Vliet is a hell of a defender at his size. Jabari Smith Jr., really kind of emerging as that multi-positional defender, kind of a versatile, high-quality role player. They're not a good offensive team. The only reason they're middle of the pack in the offensive ratings is because they're a great rebounding team. They are a star away from being a serious contender. They want to keep this core together and hope that a star emerges. I was told they will not make a splashy trade this year. The fact that Jalen Green signed his extension is also an indication of that. But down the road, could they end up trading for that star? Absolutely. What they want, though, is age appropriate, a guy who can, give them a runway to go along with a lot of this young talent. And look, would they have hit fast forward if they could have gotten their hands on your guy Donovan Mitchell last summer? Absolutely. But that's the kind of guy they want, a mid-20s guy who can be the engine of an offense. Defensively, they're going to be really good for a while.
All right, before I set you loose, last team I want to ask you about is Denver, just because they have just this generationally special, sometimes looks like he's bored. He looks like the chess master has dominated the game. But, look, they went through a stretch where Westbrook was helping out the second unit to kind of make up for the non-Jokic minutes where they looked a little bit better. But I don't know, man. Every time I hone in on them, it looks like they're in games because Jokic is so incredibly special, and they don't have enough around him to take advantage of who he is. Give me the latest Tim McMahon take on the Denver Nuggets right now.
Yeah, obviously Aaron Gordon being back will help out a lot.
Sure.
And listen, Christian Brown is a very good starting shooting guard. And you'll talk to some folks in the Nuggets front office who are taking a bit of a victory lap on letting KCP go and promoting Brown. The questions are their bench. That's always going to be the question. Russ will help you win some games and make sure you lose some games. They're thin there. If they can be healthy come playoff time, that doesn't matter nearly as much because you ramp the minutes up on the starters. Aaron Gordon plays a backup 5 minutes, and it all comes back to how good is Jamal Murray? Can he be a contender caliber sidekick? Because, as you said, Joker's incredible. While we're talking about Joker, I do want to give a shout out to my buddy Mike Singer, former Denver Post beat writer, who now actually, strangely, is part of the Nuggets front office and has a book that just published on Joker. Took a year off to write a book and then got hired by the Nuggets front office. But his book, Why So Serious? The Untold Story of NBA Champion Nikola Jokic, is out, and I'm starting to read this thing. It is like, this is a guy, a lot's not known about him, and there's a lot of really good stuff in here. So if you are looking for like a nice holiday season read on the NBA, I'd jump on that, and I'll be plugging my book when it comes out in March. Don't you worry.
Oh, and that's, of course, where I wanted to go. Do you have any information for us? Because you've been coming on the show now for 5 years, and so we've talked to you as you've gone throughout this process, writing the book about Luka, and then attended to the question, does this mean you're going to be hired by the Mavericks?
I can guarantee you it's a no on the second part of that one. I've got a better chance of relocating to Salt Lake City than getting a job in the front office here in Dallas. But no, my book will come out in late March. It is, it's done. There's a bow on it. We got a publish date, so looking forward to that. And if you want to pre-order that bad boy, you can go to my Twitter page, and it is the pinned tweet. There's a nice little link, and I would certainly appreciate that. Love it, Tim. Thanks for the time, man. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. We'll chat soon, all right? I appreciate you, brother. All right, the great Tim McMahon from ESPN. Twitter, at ESPN_McMahon. He's been working on this Luka book for years, and it's been fun to interview him as he's gone throughout the process. A lot of great Luka stories and anecdotes. As he said, his pinned tweet is the link to his book. I've already ordered it. Excited for that, so appreciate Tim's time. That's your NBA Daily Assist today. It's brought to you by About Time Pub, which is Utah's premier sports bar. They have amazing food and killer cocktails. Make About Time your place for sports or even brunch. All food is made from scratch, and they have new mocktails for those of you that don't partake in alcohol. More TVs than tables. All About Time TVs have their own receiver, so they have all the games going live. Free, high-speed Wi-Fi. It makes it a great place to, quote, work from home. Fall's here, almost winter. Well, it's technically winter. Keep About Time in mind for any upcoming holiday parties. Their locations are in Ogden, Layton, West Valley, West Jordan, Sandy, Tooele, Harriman, Bluffdale, Lehigh, and Vineyard. Utah Sports Bar celebrating their 15-year anniversary. In-house smoked wings. They have brunch available from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the weekends, including a build-your-own Bloody Mary bar. Every UFC event, no cover charge. They're at home for every major sport, both pro and college. Get more information online at abouttimepub.com. All right, we have Matt Brown, the writer and editor of Extra Points, college football newsletter. He's going to join us coming up at 4 o'clock. Dave Fox will roll by as well. And then we'll go from there on a Tuesday afternoon. So keep it right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
I'm pretty strictly anti-flute, like in a rock band, in a actual rock and roll musical arrangement. I'm pretty strictly anti-flute. Marshall Tucker Band can pull it off, and maybe Jethro Tull. But Jethro Tull, like, there's a line. I would say Jethro Tull, too much flute. Is that a hot take? I think they overdid it with the flute.
That's fair.
All right.
Chicago, a little bit.
Okay. And let me be clear. Flute in moderation is fine.
Everything.
Yeah, it's just like, well, yes. And if you cannot moderate, you must eliminate. Write that down, kids. Life lesson. But there's a real strict line where once you pass over that line with the flute, you kind of lose me.
Moody Blues?
Ooh, Big Dave would have loved that. That's my father loves Moody Blues to the point where I can't listen to him.
And, like you said, though, the flute thing, you gotta find a line, and you can't cross it.
All right, I have a moral dilemma that I'm going to present to you. Oh, no, not the ones that we'll leave those off air. I have a moral dilemma that I can bring on the air. Are you ready for it?
Me too.
Oh, do you want to go first? No, I'd love to hear the moral dilemma that just went through your mind.
Mine were more off air. As you were saying.
Let's chat after the show. All right, so I won a $500 gift card.
Okay.
A while ago. Won a golf tournament. It's not a big deal. Okay, whatever. Don't have me. 4 birdies. 75. And so with the $500 gift card, I'm able to buy some new bedding.
It wasn't Steve Young's tournament.
It wasn't. I didn't play well that tournament. But I'm able to buy some new bedding. And I just have to say, your boy could use some new bedding.
Okay.
Bedding to me is one of those things that I just forget about. And then 3 months pass and I haven't washed my sheets. And it's gross. It's a problem. Okay. I'm admitting out loud I have a problem. And I haven't bought new bedding in a long time. We're talking ripped sheets. We're talking horribly stained. I believe they call it a duvet cover. Let's be refined on the program today. So with the $500 gift card, I'm able to get a new cover for the blanket, a new sheet set, a lovely gray cuddle blanket. I'm a big warm sock guy. I can also get a 3-pack of plush lounge socks, warm wool socks for the winter. And that brings the total to $670.80. So the question is, do I just look at this as if I'm paying $170 for all of those things?
Yes.
Or do I remove one and just stay under the $500 limit and be responsible with the finances?
No, the 500 is extra. That's cherry on top. So if you're asking me, and I don't know if you should be asking me for financial things. You come from a network of folks who probably give you better advice than me.
I'll go ahead.
But I go with
text some of my VC bros about my $500 gift card to buy sheets. I'm not sure they get back to me.
But yeah, I go. This is $170.
Okay,
I'm paying $170 for all of this, not $600.
All right. Well, then I'm going to pull the trigger. Some new sheets for your boy, new duvet cover, some lovely wool socks, and then a gray cuddle blanket that will go nicely on my couch.
I love it. Congrats.
All right, moving on. I'm glad that we were able to kind of work through that. We were talking about this early in the show, and Porter, I haven't really heard your take on where we find ourselves this week with the Utah football news cycle. So, of course, there are some boxes that need to be checked. As I continue to say, I'm quite sure the people in the know already know what Kyle's going to do. We do not. There's not been an official announcement, and I'm not one to try to, kick the tires up there when it comes to information as sensitive as this. Number 2 is offensive coordinator. We've talked about the candidates. We've talked about the names that it feels like the community would prefer Utah football to go after. And number 3 is the acquisition and, quite frankly, the retention, which is a big part of this game now, of the talent you want to come back and adding some talent that you think can up your bottom line. Let me start with you with Coach Witt and what your gut is kind of telling you. I continue to go back to the media availability where I just didn't feel like we were hearing from a guy that was resigned to want to go do something else with his time. I don't feel like this is how he wants to go out, but I honestly don't have any idea as far as the news that we're going to hear. What's your gut tell you about Coach Witt and the decision that he's going to make here in the next, hopefully, couple of days?
It's so hard because my gut tells me that Kyle is hanging around simply because of the competitor I know he is and because of, as you mentioned, given really no inclination that this is it. The caveat I'll put on that, Spence, is that he's not going to give us that inclination. He's Kyle Whittingham. We're going to get an email Sunday afternoon, and maybe it's this Sunday at 5 p.m., and it'll be very short and very simple and very concise.
On the Sabbath?
You're right. It probably won't be on Sunday.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Actually, you know what? It might be.
All right.
Kyle.
Because we're not expecting it.
Kyle's not BYU's coach. Let's be clear.
Boom. During sacrament meeting, Coach Witt just sends out a tweet.
But also, and he does his sacrament thing. He goes and does the church thing, but he also very much works on Sundays. So there's a feeling to me that Kyle is going to be coaching this football team next year. But again, I put on the heavy caveat that even though, I feel I have a good relationship with Kyle. We talk after games. We talk on air, off air. He's not going to tell me, right? And he's given some, I think, unintentional leans that he may not be going anywhere, but I really don't know and can't speak for the guy. But regardless, if you ask me if he's going to be coaching this team in 3 years, I'm going to say no. Next year, I do think he's the head football coach.
All right, unintentional leans. I need you to unpack that, because just for me, and all we can go off of, and we interviewed Kyle before the BYU game, and just a little peek behind the curtains before we started to record, I asked him how he was doing, and he talked about how hard this year was, and that's what losing does, of course, when you're in the business of results. If you can't get those results, it makes the endeavors really difficult, and we know that Kyle has built the program that does the right things day in and day out. They have the right habits, and the odd juxtaposition of pro sports is you do have to be process-orientated. If you're doing the right things every day, the results will come, but sometimes those results don't come immediately, and that's why you hear things like trust the process and buy into winning the day, as Sean Payton likes to say. So I'm quite confident if Coach Witt continues to coach, that the habits that they implement up there every day will eventually lead back to the results that we're accustomed to seeing. But so for me, the unintentional leans, as you like to put it, are just the clues that you try to ascertain during his media, where I guess the bottom line for me is I feel like we would know if he was done. And the fact that we don't know, to me, indicates there's a better chance of him coming back. But what sort of unintentional leans are you referring to?
Yeah, kind of as you were talking about, right? His press conferences at coaches shows. In times that I'm around Kyle, I think that I've gotten to know him well enough to know that there's intent behind everything.
Have you ever ridden his motorcycle on the back and you just kind of hold on to him? Like, how close are you? Let's dig into it. Okay,
haven't done that.
Do you want to?
Played around a tennis once.
You played tennis with Kyle?
One time.
I heard he's good.
He's a good athlete in general.
Yeah.
But it's a guy who, although he is very close to the chest, he will give you information because he's honest. He's very frank, right? So sometimes unintentionally he'll talk about things in a way where it's not political. Right? Sometimes it can be. Kyle's calculated in those circumstances. But sometimes he may be talking about, let's say, recruiting windows, Spence, in the summer and in the spring, and he's talking about them as if he's very much already involved in that process, as if he's the head coach. Not as if he's moving on to an advisory role, not as if he's helping Morgan in that process. The second that the season ended, it seemed to me that Kyle turned his attention to recruiting, to getting guys in this locker room, to the offseason, not to retirement. And I know that that's part of what's going to happen when he does retire. He's going to make it a smooth transition. But I also I see intent behind Kyle Whittingham of the offseason being a normal offseason and preparing for kickoff next year. And maybe that's just him being really good at messaging and hiding that. But it seems like that's the way he's approaching this offseason.
Speaking of tennis, I forgot to tell you I played a little pickleball home for Thanksgiving. I know you're a big fan.
You said speaking of tennis.
Yeah. I mean, because they're basically the same sport.
Paddle sport. Okay.
Mm-hmm, yep.
How was it?
Dominated. Now, again, my 8-year-old nephew has only played pickleball a couple of times, but if you're going to be on the court,
again,
step up.
Yeah.
I don't have time to take it easy.
Can't handle the heat. get out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. All right, over to offensive coordinator. A couple minutes left during this segment. It's interesting to kind of listen to some of the feedback and read some of the predictions surrounding the dynamic of who's going to be the play caller next year and whether or not the hire will indicate, some sort of shift in philosophy or if it's going to be the same type of offensive attack that it really, quite frankly, has always been under Kyle. And that's all right. I mean, it breeds results. We've all seen it. Is there one name that's out there that you've heard that you think makes the most sense? And just generally speaking, what are you hearing about the process that they're in the middle of trying to land on an offensive coordinator?
Yeah, well, first going back to the weekend, the Ben Arbuckle stuff was very real, to the point where Utah was kind of in a couple rooms preparing for that reality. Of course, he ends up going to Oklahoma, whether that was a sweetheart deal that he couldn't pass up or whether Utah was maybe used as leverage. I'm not sure. I don't know his agent. I don't know him. But that stuff was very real, and that was what Utah was centered in on making happen before this weekend. The one name that has like been concrete as far as is a realistic process since then is Mac Leftwich of Texas State. And it's a young guy. He doesn't run the offense that you would necessarily be in line with Kyle Whittingham offenses. He runs an offense that I think aligns with what Morgan Scalley has always felt like is really difficult to defend, right? And for that reason, I do think that they're looking at this hiring process as a real collaborative approach, as a very, very much a Morgan Scalley situation, whether Kyle is here or not, because they know that is hopefully the OC and Morgan, a long-term pairing, whether Kyle's here next year or 2 years down the road, that they're hoping that this hire lasts longer than that. So it's not part of the process. And the other reason that I look at Mac Leftwich as a real scenario, his quarterback just transferred here, or at least announced his intent to transfer here. I know it's early in the cycle, but when you have those kind of like real connections, you do have to read between the lines a little bit. So that's the one name I think you look at right now after Ben Arbuckle was taken off the board. But for Utah, of course, the search is much wider than that, and that they're probably zeroed in on maybe 2 or 3 names at the most. But they have gone through a good list of dozens of guys that they feel are going to bring something to this team that they haven't been able to quite get. And like I said, I think part of that, Spence, is finding a defense that Morgan Scalley, one of the best defensive coordinators in the game, has had trouble defending. That's something he wants is a challenge, a guy that he can look across the line of scrimmage from and learn from, and also teach as well.
Yeah, and I would imagine we're going to hear announcements this week on all of these dynamics. Coach Witt, the official word there, offensive coordinator, what's that going to look like, and transfer portal right around the corner. 20-day window, a little shorter as they're trying to corral some of this stuff. Is there a lot of questions surrounding Utah football at the start of what is just a massive offseason to ensure, like I believe that it was last season, just an anomaly at a moment in time and not the new normal, to get back to the winning ways that we're accustomed to year 2 in the Big 12. All right, coming up this month, it's one of my favorite events. I believe this will be my 19th year at the Road Home. We do it every holiday season. And it really is an awesome reminder of how our community shows up, steps up, and takes care of people that right now might be suffering through some things. So ESPN 700 and the Rocky Mountain Chevy dealers invite you to help those at the Road Home this holiday season with needed blankets, coats, shoes, hats, and gloves. Drop off donations at any Rocky Mountain Chevy dealer. Visit ESPN700sports.com for the locations. Spread the warmth and help others find their way home. We're going to be out at the Road Home, I believe, December 20th and the 21st. So I'd love to meet you, say hello, and come out. It really gives you the holiday spirit and lifts your spirits for sure. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Going to bring in Matt Brown, who is the writer and editor of Extra Points, one of my favorite college football newsletters, coming up on the other side. Let's welcome in Jeff from Farmer and Chemist on a Tuesday. Jeff, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. I appreciate the time. So Farmer and Chemist, you guys offer a number of different CBD-related products. I want to start with a product that I use from you guys that's really helped me sleep. You're going to have to help me out with the name, but it is a gummy that I take at night, and I've got sleep issues. I've got restless leg, and a lot of people do. But this product you guys hooked me up with a few months back has allowed me to sleep and wake up with like no hangover effect. Let's hear about how you can help people who struggle with sleep.
Yeah, the product is called Yummy Gummy, and what we've done is we've found a good combination of different cannabinoids, and so we put CBD in with something else which is called CBN, and we have a little bit THC in there, so not enough to have the psychoactive side effects or anything else, but that combination is really, really good for sleep and anxiety.
Also, there are a lot of people out there who struggle with muscle soreness, pain, arthritis, and, some people utilize dangerous pain meds because pain is real, and you have to deal with it if you want to be able to live day to day. The problem solved. I keep a little thing of that in my golf bag because I have some tennis elbow that fires up when I'm golfing. Rub a little of that on it, and it really helps. How can you, Jeff, help people out there who deal with physical pain day to day?
Yeah, this is where the science is really interesting because CBD is really good it's well documented that it's good for sleep, pain, and anxiety. But just like with CBN for sleep, there's another cannabinoid called CBG. And so what we've done is combine CBG with CBD, and that's fantastic anti-inflammatory and pain med. And it doesn't have the side effects, the kidney or liver side effects that NSAIDs or acetaminophen have. And so very effective, very potent, pretty clean. And but there's different ways you can take it. You can take it systemically, you can take it topically, and so that's another consideration. That's why we would love to talk to people's pharmacists. It's just finding the right drug, the right route, and everything else, so it'll work for people.
All right, Jeff, we all love our pets. And if there are people out there that have nervous pets, nervous animals, you also offer products that have been found to really be helpful for pets. Let's hear about those.
Yeah, we have some chews and some tinctures for pets. And so mammals essentially have the same receptors as humans do for these types of things. And so dogs, for example, feel anxiety just like humans do. And so CBD, CBN, CBG work very similarly. And so it's, these are amazing things for pets as well. And the science is very similar to how it works in humans.
All right, before I set you loose, what's the special offer you have for our listeners who come on out and check out the spot?
Yeah, mention ESPN 700 either online or in the store, and we will take 20% off of any order.
Great. Jeff, thanks for the time. Have a great week. We'll chat soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, Farmer and Chemist, check them out. They're on historic Main Street in Midvale. It's a really cool store. Also online at farmerandchemist.com. Use the promo code ESPN700. You get 20% off your first order with our good friends at Farmer and Chemist. All right, more college football comes up on the other side with Matt Brown. Then it's Dave Fox, and we'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of The Drive on a Tuesday right here on ESPN 700. What did we just talk about? What did I just say to you about flute last segment? We just had a conversation about the flute, and please help me understand whether or not you heard what I actually said to you.
Yeah, you said, and I quote, Marshall Tucker Band knows how to find that balance.
No, I said some flute is fine, but too much flute ruins the whole thing. Now we're approaching the line of too much flute.
So Marshall Tucker Band, too much flute, you're now saying?
At times. Look, flute in moderation, I'm fine with. Too much flute, then what are we doing here?
You're not wrong.
Last flute song of the day.
We'll see.
Deal? Okay. I bet Matt Brown has a hot take on this. So Matt, I'm not anti-flute. I'm just saying if you're going to implement a flute in a rock band, there has to be a line.
I mean, I completely agree. If you go too hard in the paint, you're basically Ron Burgundy, which is fine in very small doses, but that changes the whole paradigm of the song.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys. I'm an absolute sucker for a horn section in a rock song, but flute is generally not the instrument that I would go for first.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And while we're in the weird space to start an interview off in a strange way, I have a moral dilemma that Porter weighed in on last segment. I'm going to ask you, Matt Brown. Are you ready?
Of course. This is what people pay me for, of course.
Indeed. Okay, so I was fortunate enough to do well at a golf tournament and was rewarded with a $500 gift card to a online store that offers sheets and bedding and such. And, Matt, I'll just say your boy could use some bedding, okay? It's been a while.
Sure.
Bedding's one of those guys, as a bachelor, you just forget about, and then suddenly you need new sheets. So here's the deal, $500 gift card, and in my checkout basket, I have $690 worth of sheets and bedding. Do I just buy it and view the whole thing as if I paid $190 for sheets and bedding, or do I have to take some off to stay under the $500 limit?
I think you absolutely buy the whole thing. I mean, this is why companies donate gift cards to be a part of events. Legitimately, to kind of bring this full circle, when we were recruiting sponsors to help us with our bowl game, the Extra Points Bowl a couple of weeks ago, this was part of the sales pitch. Like, give athletes gift cards, give fans and participating people gift cards, knowing that many of them will spend more than the value of the card, and you move some merch with the lower margin. Buy the sheets that you need. If you need $690 worth of sheets, I feel bad for your bed situation, but best to do that now than prolong it in the name of staying under the $500. That's part of the deal.
Okay, I feel justified, and yes, the bed situation, it needs to be rectified, but I think this purchase will do just that. It's been a minute, Matt. All right, moving on to things that listeners actually care about, as opposed to the weird way to start the interview. Let's start with some local stuff here. You know, tonight released the CFP rankings. And Tuesday nights have been exciting for Cougar fans, BYU fans, up until now. And, you know, 2 losses, and it's when they happened. They still have a resume that stacks up with a lot of the teams that are close to the top 12. But I wonder what you make of BYU kind of faltering down the stretch and losing 2 of their final 3 games.
I think it's about to be expected. I don't mean this to be disrespectful to any BYU fans, right? I watched this team a fair amount this year. Dramatically overperformed expectations, should feel thrilled and over the moon with this season. I think it's difficult to reconcile what we saw with our eyeballs and also the framing of BYU based on what we thought they were going to be ahead of the season and the idea that this is a top 10 team. And I think part of the thing that works against BYU too, even though they can very credibly say, no, we're the only team to beat SMU. We have one of the best wins in the entire country. And regardless of whether this is true or not, I think it's very easy for the people on the selection committee to rationalize that, saying, but SMU is a different team now. They've got a different quarterback situation. If you played them now, we'd be laying SMU minus 11 or something. And you know, whether that's fair or not, I'm certain that's the rationale. I understand how frustrating it can be because I do think you can make a reasonable stats argument for why BYU should actually be in the conversation instead of Miami, instead of Ole Miss. But if you told BYU fans back in August you are going to win double-digit games and be infuriated that you're going to miss the playoff, I think every single person would sign up for that because we probably even talked about it on the air.
you and me and a lot of smart people in Vegas thought this wasn't even a bowl team, let alone one of the better teams in recent memory.
For sure. I wonder, you spent some time out here, did a really fun story on your trip out here to Provo. And, you're one of the guys I lean on in the newsletter that you write. I read to kind of get educated on the NIL space and the business of college football and things that happen off the field. And there's this conversation that takes place out here about the BYU football model and whether or not it can work and be sustainable in the modern day and age of college football. And we know that the basketball team is receiving a lot of NIL assistance from Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge and others. And I honestly don't know. I straight up asked Kalani at Big 12 Media Days if he's getting the same type of financial support that the basketball team is getting. He did not like the question. I'll just leave it at that. Gave me a nice Kalani answer. But were you able to uncover, like, when you hear the BYU football model, what sort of NIL initiatives does that include? And are they getting support to make sure that this season of results isn't something that's just a moment in time, but actually sustainable?
Well, I think there's a couple of things we have to think about here. I think it's fair to say about NIL from this season of results, right? There is a minimum payroll level that you probably need to retain Power 4 caliber talent or high level Mountain West caliber talent. And that number is much smaller than coaches and people that work for On3 and people that work in the NIL recruiting, mega complex, I think would want you to believe. The high number purportedly this year, it's a little frustrating we can't get great information on this, but I think this is in the ballpark. It's Ohio State at around 20 million, whether it's 18, 19, 20 million, and they are barely going to make the playoffs. They did not win the Big Ten. They did not beat Michigan. They did not do any of their immediate goals coming into this season, and spending $1 billion. Florida State had a payroll of over 10. They're one of the worst teams in the country. They would have been a betting underdog against multiple FCS teams this year. There are lots of teams that went all in financially and spending over $10 million and are not going to make the playoff, are not going to come close to their goals. I don't know what the number is for BYU. I would feel comfortable assuming it's under 10 and probably on the lower end. And from my understanding, part of the bet that this team made was we are going to get better on the football field by retaining as much of our previous roster as possible, where you had a lot more attrition, and hope that continuity and experience and more time under our coaches will lead to natural improvement where we don't need to turn over 26% of our roster. And this year, that worked. I know part of that worked because you got some improvement that's statistically unlikely from some skill position guys. Part of that worked because I don't want to say lucky, but the ball bounced fortuitously in a few ways, that's football. That happens sometimes. It's not something I think you can necessarily plan on happening every single year, but it certainly can work. And to a lesser extent, I think that's a little bit of the model that has to work for Utah or almost everybody else in the Big 12. There's nobody in this conference, nobody that can recruit out of high school at the level necessary to win a national championship. Nobody is signing more than 13, 12 four-star guys. Everybody is recruiting developmental football players and shopping at the scratch and dent sale in the transfer market to see if they can go get turn a second chance four-star guy and having him blossom if he comes over there. And you can win 10 games, and I think you'll be able to win some playoff games and have great seasons that way. And some years you're going to go 4-8. If you want to win 10 games every year, you got to recruit like Ohio State does. But in this league where nobody is at Ohio State, I think if you're BYU and you don't have to spend $12 million necessarily, if you're recruiting people that can be successful at BYU, can stay enrolled and eligible at BYU, and are willing to stay at that school for multiple years. If you identify the right people, you can be in conversation for a league title every couple of years, a decade. That's just like Iowa State's doing.
But in order to make a 10-win season sustainable, if I'm understanding you correctly, there will need to be some sort of financial infusion, some economic infusion into the football program to be who they were this year consistently, correct? I mean, they can't rely on smoke. I hate to say smoke and mirrors because I think they're good and I think they're better than anybody thought that they would be, but this did feel like more of like a moment in time. If they want to be this every year, checks have to be written. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I think if you want to be like this every year, you need a different caliber of roster. I would say the same thing to Iowa State. I would say the same thing to Houston. I would say the same thing to Arizona State, which is what Dillingham is, I think, is also kind of saying here too. You're not going to identify every single 86 rated recruit perfectly every single time. You're not going to get the right JUCO development guy every single time. The way that you can win 10 games consistently is by having a really good staff, a really good head coach, a really good culture, and then getting the guys that you need. And for BYU, it's just different because your recruiting pool is so different. You can't go after the same kind of guys that other peers in this league can for, the same reasons you and I talk about all the time. I think you do need a minimum baseline, but if that minimum baseline for team payroll is like $3.5 million, I think you're fine. Or $3 million across an entire team. That's what the high end of the Mountain West is spending. I think you'll be okay because the whole when BYU is recruiting a football player, just like when they're recruiting a student for that matter, if money is the single most important thing, they're probably not going to get that guy. If money is important, but they care about 4 or 5 other things, they're more likely to get that guy. And that works for some people and it doesn't for others, and that's okay.
Is NIL tithed?
It should be, right?
Yeah.
It's income.
Yeah.
It's an increase. Consult. I would encourage listeners to consult your relevant ecclesiastical authorities whether you should pay net or gross on NIL earnings. But my reading of the handbook would indicate it should be tithed.
You are literally you're the only college football media member I can ask that question to that understands what I'm saying.
Take that, McMurphy. Yeah, you haven't done the reading like I have.
How long, Matt, are we going to? Because if I'm understanding this correctly, this is all still left under the jurisdiction of the institutions, and so like the details. Yeah. If you're going to have a player sign a contract, because we were debating this earlier. If Utah football tried to acquire talent via the transfer portal, and if the Utah model, and I'm not saying that it is, because I honestly don't know, so let me be clear about that.
Yeah.
But if the Utah model has a contractual arrangement with a player that limits the ability to transfer or whatever, they're just going to go find a different contract from a different institution that satisfies what they're looking for. How long are we going to deal with this? At what point are we just going to have uniformity so there isn't Ohio State at $20 million and BYU at $3 million or whatever it is? How long are we going to deal with this chaos?
I mean, if you're looking for uniformity, I think the answer is forever. The way you get uniformity is with a collective bargaining agreement and a salary cap and an enforcement mechanism to go after that cap. And you guys follow the NBA. People in this market care. Even with a really strict salary cap and people having to pay real penalties for getting around that cap, you and I and God all know that Miami and the Lakers and the Knicks do things that you can't do in Salt Lake, right. That you can't do in Cleveland, that you can't do in Indianapolis to get over that number. And that's going to be true in college football too. If this House settlement is actually certified, which is still a little bit of an open question, then there's going to be some level of uniformity in what Power 4 schools can offer. But that money also has to get split up amongst basketball. That money may need to be split up against other sports as well. And to the extent that other boosters can raise money above that $20.8 million or whatever it ends up being, it's still very much an open question. And what I would tell, any fans or parents or anyone that's listening to this, like for this first year, there really are no rules. The NCAA can't meaningfully enforce any of this stuff. The plaintiffs' attorneys and the judges are kind of making it up as they go along. There'll probably be some more standardization after this coming year. But I think it would be very, very difficult to be a coach of any sport trying to figure out recruiting. You've got National Signing Day here in a couple of days, and you might not even know how many people you're allowed to have on your roster next year. It's a very difficult thing. But if your hope is to have the same resources as Ohio State or Texas or Alabama, I think you're going to need to be waiting a lot longer.
And I guess there's a conversation to be had that it's always kind of been that way, and now it's just right in front of our face, right? I wonder, Matt, in your opinion, because I have your Twitter pulled up, and I'm seeing the tweet about I think it's Cooper Legas and Miles Jackson. who claimed that they were promised NIL money that they did not receive. And you and I have talked about this. Get it in writing. Get it in writing. Do everything you have to do to make them write it down and sign the document. But my question is, what is the biggest or a couple of pieces of collateral damage that are in play now as a result of, as you say, really no rules and figuring it out as we go along? What are the pieces of collateral damage that come about as a result of this chaos?
I think we just identified a perfect case. And so the event that we're both discussing here is a news story out of Tulsa, where multiple players on the team said, "Hey, we came down here under the expectation we would be paid X, Y, or Z. Kevin Wilson just got fired. Nobody's taking our calls with our collective, and we're out of the money." And yes, of course you should get this stuff in writing. And I say this as somebody who has been burned by this in his career, both as being a reporter and before being a reporter. And I think that happens to a lot of 20-somethings. Is the job that a recruiter offers, or the terms that you thought you agreed upon aren't the same ones when you show up at the first day of work or when that first paycheck comes. I think it really sucks in college that so many athletes, particularly at the mid-major and low-major level, are advised by people who are not competent advisors, are advised by agents who are not attorneys, who are not licensed in their various states, who are not certified by the NFLPA or the Basketball Players Association. They're just guys. And they're guys that don't know what they're doing. And that's part of what creates situations like this. We even saw this at UNLV with their last quarterback, and that was with an agent at a grown-up agency, like of actual professionals, screwed up in a deeply amateur hour way. I think if fans really realize the kind of the caliber of professional that is giving advice and trying to manage the recruitment of a lot of people who play locally, they would be shocked. and that is going to hurt and has hurt the earning potential for a lot of athletes.
I have a simple question with a very complex, nuanced answer, I'm sure, because you referenced this earlier, and I totally agree with you, and maybe the term uniformity is the wrong one to use here, but some semblance of the dust has settled, and we have at least a blueprint of what this thing could look like moving forward. Probably will not come about until these players unionize, and there is a collective bargaining agreement with whatever the powers that be look like. The governing body that now is in charge of college football if they break away. What's stopping that? Like, to me, it is the only solution. And it is the direction it feels like it's going. And I don't know when, and I know there's a lot of red tape and it's a complex issue, but I do feel like that is the only legitimate solution that would solve the majority of the issues that is causing chaos for a sport that we all love. What are the roadblocks between here and there?
There's a lot, if that's where you want to go. Roadblock number one is that while many coaches would agree with you, and a surprising number of athletic directors will agree with you, especially if you turn off the microphone and get one cocktail in them at the conference bar. University presidents overwhelmingly hate that idea. They don't want that because they don't want to enter into a formal employee-employer relationship. They don't want that because that would be governed by state-level labor law, which differs enormously across the country, which will make conference-wide deals much harder to do, and it opens up some legal challenges about which athletes are employees. It's one thing to say, Ohio State football players should probably be under some kind of CBA. They're obviously professionals. They make more than any of us will in a year at any of our careers. It's another thing does that include Utah gymnasts? I mean, that's a revenue positive sport, and they're controlled at the same level that a football player does. What about UVU volleyball players? Well, they don't generate revenue, but the control's the same way, and you can see how that gets complicated. So we have the university presidents in one bucket. The thing about unions and about having a CBA is you need a union. And management can't make a union for you. I can't post a union into existence, or at least a very good one. Labor has to do that. And a college athlete union, even one with a really small bargaining unit of just athletes in a certain sport, would be, if not among the youngest and most transient unions in the entire world. I've done labor organizing before. I helped organize a union when I was at Vox. I've done this earlier in my career. It's extremely hard. And it's even harder when you're dealing with people that don't come from union backgrounds and might not have a lot of things in common, which is the way that college athletics is. We've had lots of efforts now to organize those athletes, and they've all mostly failed. That could change in the future, but right now it doesn't look good. And the last couple of chances have not done very well. The last thing, forgive me for bringing this up here in this market, but we're about to have a substantially less friendly to labor federal government. We might not have a National Labor Relations Board in 2 or 3 years. You're going to have an NLRB while it still exists. That's going to be way more hostile to unionization efforts on college campuses, not just for athletes, but for graduate students and TAs. And if that gets clawed back, it doesn't really matter what labor does because the law is the law. So I think if what you want is what the NFL has, there's so much inertia and legal momentum against that. I'm way more skeptical of it happening in the short term than I was 9 months ago. If you want a CBA, the closest thing you're going to get in the short term is the House settlement. And there's a whole bunch of questions with that.
Wow. Okay. Last thing. Now, having said all of that, Matt, do you still think at the end of the day that will be what college football looks like when the dust actually settles, even if it's in 10 years? Do you still think that's where we're headed at some point?
At some point, maybe, but I'm less certain of that than I was last year. I think the only thing that I feel pretty confident about is that we are moving in a direction, probably not in 2025, but maybe soon after that, where big-time college football is even further separates itself from the NCAA. And I wouldn't be shocked if in 2 or 3 years we don't have an NCAA. We have a basketball tournament that's governed by USA Basketball in conjunction with some event management companies. We have the college football playoff as a separate organization. We have USA Baseball. We have USA Wrestling, and we have different sport-specific federations, and the NCAA is a debating society for the Overlands and Westminsters of the world. But to what that means for employment and what that means for organized labor or a CBA, those are fundamentally, they're about things that are above the pay grade of you and I. And if I was good at predicting what's going to happen with the Trump White House or what the Supreme Court's going to do, I wouldn't be making my money talking here about flutes and rock bands with you guys.
Fair enough, but it might be only above my pay grade, Matt, because I am not sponsoring a bowl game, but you are. Let's hear the details about the Extra Points Bowl that you guys are sponsoring over at your spot.
Yeah, this game actually wrapped up. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Played in the Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, Ohio. It featured the Marietta College Pioneers and the Westminster Titans, 2 Division III schools, one in Southern Ohio, one just outside Pittsburgh. Westminster won the game, and it was among the highlights of my professional career. It is an amazing venue to have a high-level football game. All the players got to do a tour of the NFL Hall of Fame beforehand. Visit Canton did a great job. And I think one of the really cool things, even though there wasn't a massive crowd or anything, but at the Division III level, where no one's really talking about NIL, no one's really talking about trying to transfer and maybe get a spot on the Ohio Bobcats roster next year or something. The biggest thing for all these guys who missed the playoff is they just wanted one more game with their brothers, one more bus ride, one more team dinner, one more chance to compete and participate in something that's been such an integral part of their lives. And that's what we were able to do here. We've learned a lot. I think we're going to have a much better, more expansive event next year. But this was absolutely money well spent. And I've learned a lot and have a different level of appreciation for the folks that help make postseason and NTE events work now across the country.
Very cool, Matt. Where can people go find all your work?
You can find what we're working on here at extrapointsmb.com. We publish a newsletter 4 days a week covering business policy and off-the-field stories in college sports. Some of that's free. Some of that's behind a paywall, so I can buy Lunchables for my kids. And you can find me on Twitter at Matt Brown EP and on Blue Sky at Matt Brown. Have some other reporting coming up soon. And I know I think we're out of time here, but legitimately the bowl game did give me an idea for what a similar event could look like in Utah, because I have a basketball idea. It's going to take some talking folks into. But if it can be pulled off, if we can get the right people to say it's okay, I think would be really, really exciting and very true to this market.
You have me intrigued. You also have my support. If we can help, let us know. Always illuminating, my friend. Be well, okay?
Okay, you bet. Take care, guys.
All right, Matt Brown, at Matt Brown EP on social. Let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Pros. 3 different, very affordable solutions for internet access, cable, television, and your wireless setup if you dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yes, and this is the fun part of our job. We get to save people money. Guys, listen, if you're unhappy with your current TV solution, your bill went up, your service is a little glitchy. You know what it's like. You're not getting the service you expect, and all they do is want to charge you more. Pay less. Pick up the phone and call us. Get the biggest, fastest DVR out there. Auto records your locals. Auto records your favorite games. They'll even auto hop commercials. Every receiver comes with a remote locator. You'll have full access to all your content at home and also on the Dish Anywhere app. Plus, Dish has moved in. They've got the streaming apps available. Right out of the gate, we're going to have Netflix, YouTube, and Amazon Prime, but you can add any streaming app you want. But Netflix is quite the popular one, so how about we throw in Netflix with the 2-year promotion? Not only make Netflix free for 2 years, get you that price guaranteed, throw in some movie channels on top of that. We'll throw in dinner at JCW's. It's so easy, so simple. Lower your bill, call up and just say, hey, this is what I have, this is what I want, and let us work our magic. And don't get held hostage by the cable company if they're telling you, if you change your TV service, you lose your deal on your internet. Guys, we have tricks to that where we can help you or even offer another internet solution and lower that bill. $70, $130 a month. And if you want to take advantage also of the wireless services we have, this is fantastic. Get a brand new iPhone 16 Pro or Samsung S24 with no trade-in. Use probably the same cell towers you're currently using. Just pay your phone bill to somebody else. Have the best service coverage out there. And pay $20, $30 a line less. Guys, that money adds up quick. Call us today and let's start saving you money today. Remember, if you get a flyer or a mailer, and Dish sends out some of these as of late, they're addressed to you, special offer. They say Dish on them. Open them up. Call us with that offer and let us throw that offer on top of the current offer and save you more money. 424-DISH. Call us, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Dave Fox live in studio. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Don't. You can turn his mic on. I'll turn your mic on if you stop dancing like that.
Sorry.
There we go. Dave Fox live in studio. Yeah. Okay, which TikTok influencer did you find that song from?
It's Madison Beer.
Obviously.
She's got a couple of hits out there that I like. Yeah. And just thought I'd share it with you.
Do you ever go see any of these EDM bands live?
No, not really, because the best ones aren't in Utah. Like the festival, like the one in Vegas that's at the racetrack that they do every year is phenomenal, but I haven't been down to that yet.
Well, how do you know it's phenomenal if you haven't been there?
Because I watch they stream them live.
Well,
so
we need to get you there live, because if you're a real EDM fan, I can hook you up with some X. We can throw you for a ride, a little ecstasy, right? You don't have to tell anyone. I want to see Dave Fox on ecstasy at an EDM show.
That's not going to happen.
Little Molly, yeah. Hey, call your Molly guy, Porter.
Hey, by the way, I want to apologize
finally.
For Spence.
What?
Being so rude to you about the flute. There's nothing. As a longtime Moody Blues fan, I like the flute.
No. You don't know the full context. We had a conversation, man to man, where we agreed that too much flute in excess is a bad thing. So I told him I'm fine with flute, but in moderation. You have to moderate the flute, Dave.
He did too much flute today?
Yes, we went extreme flute today. That was my issue. Okay. My issue is not with the flute. It's when you don't moderate the flute.
Don't do too much of it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I enjoyed it. Yeah. So,
we'll get more flute.
No more flute.
There's a ton of Moody Blues songs with flutes, but they're from the 70s.
Of course, that was one
I mentioned.
Big Dave loves himself some Moody Blues
and EDM.
I doubt that he's ever heard EDM, but I will tell you this: my dad is a really good sport.
Yeah.
So he, when I was a teenager, I started listening to rap. I started listening to hip hop. And breaking news: my dad's not a hip hop guy.
Dude, what a shock!
And he wasn't, thrilled with the music that was coming from the bedroom, but he at least tried. And he was at a Knick game one night. I don't think I've ever told you this. He comes home from the game and he said, "Spence, guess who I met tonight at the Garden?" I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Snoopy Dogg." And I went, "Oh, so close, Dad." It's like, thank you. Like, he was genuinely excited to tell me.
To tell you.
He just got the name or Snoopy Dogg.
By the way, that's cool that he met him.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure he met a lot of people when he was running the Knicks back in the day.
Yeah, that's safe to say. That's safe to say.
That's awesome. Snoop Dogg.
Don't do that.
I met him too, by the way.
You met Snoop Dogg where?
He performed at the Gallivan Plaza. And after the performance, you'll love this story.
You guys smoked a ton of weed.
He met me and Mark and Shauna Lake at the time.
Okay.
He actually invited Shauna Lake to ride with him in their motorhome to Las Vegas.
I'm sure he did.
She was about ready to go until we said, "You don't want to do that."
Or did she?
But he was very, very nice. Mm-hmm. He unbelievably different from the performance persona. Mm-hmm. Couldn't have been nicer to us. Spent some time talking with us, 15, 20 minutes, and then hopped in his really tricked out motorhome and left.
My man has built himself quite the brand.
He sure has.
There's no doubt. All right.
Sure
how was Thanksgiving in the Fox household?
It was great.
Okay.
It was fantastic.
Good.
The usual. Everyone came over, took the grandkids that night to Moana, and the Cowboys won. Although I'm not that sure that's such a good thing, because that's ruining my Dion and Shadeur to Dallas plans.
Isn't it Moana 2?
Yeah, sorry, Moana 2.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Because I tapped out of it. My family went, and I elected to go have some dinner with high school friends.
I
never saw Moana 1, just so you know.
You need to, and I hadn't seen it either, but I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who watches it nonstop.
Very nice.
If I happen to be babysitting her, that comes on immediately. So I got so into it, I couldn't wait to see Moana 2. She enjoyed it. You know what? They make these movies, the first ones, because they love the story and they want to share it. They make the sequels because the first one made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And usually they're not quite as good.
Speaking of grandkids, is congratulations in order? Did I see an Instagram post that we have twins, maybe?
We had Kelly had identical twin boys born. They were actually born October 3rd. They were in the NICU for about a month.
Oh, wow.
So
doing well now?
Doing great. They're
okay,
home.
Good.
But we didn't post until she was ready.
Sure.
They came home. They were on oxygen for a couple of weeks, but they're great. They're up in fact, they're visiting right now just as I left to come and do this.
Very nice. Well, congrats on that.
Thanks.
Great to hear all as
Fantastic.
well. All right, David, since you and I last spoke, season comes to an end for Utah football. Let's do a little Utes here. Then we'll do a little BYU Jazz Hockey Club if time allows. You get the win at the end and some fun moments. Mekhi Bernard's 1,000-yard back, 17th back in Utah history, first since Tavion in 2021. And you send the seniors out with a win. There's no bowl game. Look, you can't spin it any other way than ultimately a very disappointing season, in my opinion. The result combined with the expectations leads me to believe this is the worst season they've had under Kyle, and I think he would admit that. So before we get to what's next, what are your thoughts on the football season that's now behind us for the Utes?
Well, I mean, we were talking with about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and some of the conversation centered around, do you even really want to go to a bowl game at this point? You know what I mean? When a season is so disappointing, maybe it's best to just get it out of the way, because then you've got, another month of thinking about some crappy bowl game you're going to end up going to and a half a dozen players who won't go anyway. So it was tough. I think Isaac was put in a really rough situation. I still don't really know. I don't know if any of us really know how good or bad he is, because it was just such a tough spot to be in. So, I mean, disappointing from the word go. But, there were so many. It's funny, if you look at both BYU and Utah, either season could have gone almost either way because of how many close games there were. It was just unreal. But it doesn't matter. That's the way it ended. It's time to move on, get into that transfer portal. Now we all wonder what Coach Witt's going to do. There's so many different thoughts on that. Does he want to not retire on a season like that, or does a season like that take so much out of it? You're just like, all right, I'm through. It's time to move on. So that's the next big announcement that we're all looking forward to hearing.
Before we get to that, let me stay in the space of kind of what we just experienced and your point about Isaac. I think you're right that it's way too early to anoint or dismiss, but I think it's fair to say he just wasn't ready for the position he was thrust into as an 18-year-old who enrolled in April. And I don't think that should surprise anybody, because Arch Manning sat his first year. There are very few true freshmen, 18-year-olds, that go from dissecting Farmington secondary to Big 12 secondaries and do it at a high level. But I do think it's also fair to wonder aloud whether or not, like Noah Fafita hits the transfer portal today, right? Arizona's quarterback. 2 years ago, dynamic. This last year, not as good. He has 2 years to play. I wonder if whether it's Noah or somebody else, I wonder if they're looking at the transfer portal to try to find an immediate solution under center, because I just don't think it's on the roster unless Cam comes back, and we're still waiting for word on that.
Oh, I think absolutely they are. And there's rumors about this Washington State quarterback thing, and there's quarterbacks are going to enter the portal like crazy. You know that. You just mentioned, Arizona's quarterback, and he's been there a couple of years. I don't think there's any question, and I'm not saying it's an indictment on Isaac Wilson. You have to bring in competition. Even if you think Isaac just needs more time and he's going to be your guy, you've got to bring in competition, and I think they know that now. And what if, Whittingham still hasn't discounted the idea of another year of Cam, which is, some people might just be like, what? Is that even possible?
Look, for 2 straight years, they played 5 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You have to have more than 1 or 2
Absolutely.
if this is how you're going to roll. But you brought up Cam, so let's go there for a moment. Here's how I'm going to pose the question. If you're Coach Witt and Cam comes in your office and he sits down, he said, I've decided I want to come back for my 8th year. I've decided that's what I want to do. And look, the other element to this new era of college football is we have to talk about what the checks look like. Is there a school that is following the Cam Rising situation and says, look, that's run its course, man. But you come here, I'm going to pay you $250,000 or whatever it is. Or does if you're a Utah booster, are you in the mood to write Cam Rising a check after the past couple of years where he hasn't played more than 2 or 3 games? So the way I'll pose it is, if everything is equal, if Cam can get some NIL cash and he comes in and he sits across from Kyle and he says, I want to come back, what do you think Kyle says to him?
Well, okay, since you pose it that way, what does Kyle say to him? I get the sense that Kyle feels real comfortable with Cam if he's healthy, because he's the known. He knows what he can do if he stays healthy. So maybe he thinks, hey, maybe you and I together can run it back. But how do you keep him healthy? I mean, I don't know if anyone's really to blame about that. If we go back to just this year's injury, remember, it's the game where he's running out of bounds, and instead of throwing the ball away, he gets hit, and that was the beginning of the end. How do you not coach aggressive play? There's nothing you can really do about that. But, man, if I can't put words in Kyle's mouth. Neither one of us can. But maybe there's some connection there that he just feels like, all right, let's give it one more shot. But if you do that, you sure as heck better have a strong quarterback room to go along with it, because history tells us there's no chance even if he comes back, he makes it all the way through an entire season healthy.
I'm honestly conflicted on this one, and I rarely am with stuff like this because part of me believes, and like you, I don't know where Kyle's head would be at with this, but part of me believes it's best. It's like the marriage that is like run its course. And you love each other. Hey, thanks for the memories. Boom, we're going our separate ways. And it just kind of feels like that's the Utah football Cam Rising situation where, hey, thanks for the memories. Probably best for, you go get paid to play football as long as you can, Cam. If there's a school out there that's going to write you a check for a few $100,000, that's better than hitting the job market and being the general manager of a Shields or something. So go make your money. All due respect, Shields.
Yeah, they sell good stuff.
So go make your money, but I think it's probably go find it elsewhere. We're probably going to move on as a program. That would be my guess, and I do think that's best. But there is still that part of me that remembers what it looked like when he was right. Mm-hmm. And if he comes back and they're 6-0, to start the season, and he's balling out, fans are quick to forget and forgive if you're winning football games.
Well, and don't forget Kyle at the end of the season, just last week. And again, he says all the right things. If there's anything we've learned about Kyle, he does not make a mistake at the podium. But he said that, the decision is Cam's. You remember he said that. He said, we're waiting to hear from Cam on what he wants to do.
That's why I posed the question, what does Kyle say if Cam says, I want back in?
But why does he say that if Kyle's meeting with Cam was, no, you need to move on? Then there wouldn't even be a discussion.
Well, I don't know if that's what he would say, Dave. I'm saying that's what my gut tells me. It feels like it's best for everybody.
I agree with you, but I don't. I mean, I'm just guessing. I'm thinking maybe that he's going to let him make that.
So based off of what Kyle said, if Cam comes in and is like, I'm back, you think Kyle just opens the door?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he does.
If Kyle comes back. If Kyle doesn't come back, and then it's up to.
So let's move over to that space now, because ultimately, I honestly thought that this announcement would have been made on Monday.
I did too.
I do feel like if he was stepping away, he would know and we would know. I also feel like the people that are in the need to know room already know. Kyle's not going to approach this with ambiguity. He's not going to put Morgan in a bad spot. He's not going to put the program in a bad spot while they wait for him to decide. That's not how he is. So because we haven't heard, my gut tells me he's back.
And I agree with you. And to your point, there is absolutely nothing to gain by waiting unless he seriously doesn't know, because all you're doing is you're putting the transfer portal at risk. You're putting signing days tomorrow. You're putting that at risk. You're putting a lot of things at risk, even though he has said any decision that we make, obviously Coach Scally will be heavily involved. He came right out and said that. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. If you're stepping down, why not make the announcement on Monday? Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought was going to happen. So I'm gonna err on the side of caution and totally agree with you on this one that he's probably not stepping down because he would have already done it, unless it's such an incredibly agonizing decision he just can't make up his mind.
And see, Kyle doesn't strike me as that type of person. He just doesn't strike me as like an emotionally flaky person. He just strikes me as a guy that's going to make the decision and then go full speed in that direction one way or the other.
And there's too much going on right now with recruits and portal and all that stuff for him not to make that decision if he's leaving.
I will say this. I wouldn't, like, if we're both wrong and there's some flip and he leaves, I wouldn't blame him.
Oh, I wouldn't either.
There's nothing.
I wouldn't have one
Let
bit.
me be clear. There's nothing left that Kyle has to prove. There just isn't. No. And yes, it's fair to say that this was probably the worst Utah football season under Coach Witt. It's not just the results, it's combined with the expectations. That's fair to say, but nothing about an uncomfortable ending diminishes 20 years of high-level coaching and one of the most well-respected coaches in the country. So if we did hear, like, hey, kind of over this, I wouldn't blame him.
He also has an incredible retirement package, which makes, if you want to dumb this down to the financial end of it, it makes it pretty palatable for him if that's the choice he wants to make.
Is it Dave Fox retirement money?
Oh, I mean, come on.
Come on. Let's
far exceeds that. Everybody in this room could put their retirement money together. It wouldn't equal what he's getting.
Porter, how many Pelotons does Coach Witt have? Do you have any idea how many Pelotons Kyle has in his house?
That's a good question.
Over, under 1.5.
I'm going to say he's probably just got like the bike. I know he has a stair stepper, but I don't know if it's Peloton brand or not.
I don't know if Peloton makes a stair stepper. Maybe they do.
Well, you don't know. You have two of them. But Kyle's a little bit more practical than you are. He's not as flashy. He's rooted in substance, not in flash. So
he doesn't have any Emmys either.
No, that's true. He hasn't tried. The last thing Kyle will ever do is media, don't you think? Like,
I can't even imagine that.
I do think he would be fun to hear analyze a game, but I don't think he would want to deal with everything that comes with being a media member.
Not even a little bit. Totally agree with you on that one.
All right, over to BYU. So tonight is the latest iteration of the CFP rankings. If I had to guess, 16 through 18 is where they'll fall. I think they're a top 20 team. And
does it really even matter at this point? They're not in that group.
They're not in the 12, but not that 12. I know what you're thinking.
Wait, which 12?
Well, they might be in that 12, but the other 12 to get
12.
into the CFP. Oh, by the way, we were debating whether or not NIL is tied.
I heard this.
As a man who is a card-carrying banner waver of the movement, do you have any insight as to whether or not NIL is tied?
I would think for the player receiving that, it's a source of income, and therefore it probably would be.
Are you a full tithe payer?
Well, how can you ask a question like that?
Porter, we have some phone calls to make after.
That's awful.
Mm-hmm. I'm just making sure.
Do you observe the word of wisdom?
Of course. If you're going to if you're going to be flashing the card, I just want to make sure you're good to go.
I follow all the things that I need to follow.
Sounds like I have some calls to make after the show. All right. So when you look at BYU's resume, the numbers actually stack up to teams like Ole Miss or a Tennessee, teams in the top 12. The problem is the committee told us from day one, Big 12, you are a one-bid league, period. BYU undefeated was at 9 in the first iteration. So this is a one-bid league, and it looks like BYU, according to Kyle Boniger, who joined us earlier, Alamo Bowl against Colorado. No, it's not a CFP game, but that's a good payout.
That's a real good game.
And a lot of eyes between the BYU brand and the Colorado brand, but they did stumble down the stretch, losing 2 of 3.
Well, and if they had lost 2 of 3 to open the season and then won all the rest of their games, then they'd be in the Big 12 championship game and still be in the hunt here. So you brought this up with your last guest as well. I believe it was, or one of your guests today. I listened all day because I'm glued. Its timing is a big part of this, huge part of this. Yeah. And to lose 2 out of 3 at the end of the season, that's difficult. And you're very close to. I mean, good heavens, Houston had the ball with a chance to win the game. They almost lost the Utah game. It could have been even worse, but. They're in a situation. It is what it is at this point. And you know what? I kind of like that bowl game. That Colorado BYU would have made a great Big 12 championship game.
That's the one I was
really
cheering
would've.
for. That's the one I wanted
think we
to see.
all were.
Yeah, that would have
absolutely.
been fun.
So, but you have to live with it. And no, I don't think they're going to be ranked any. Well, I think we all know the CFP is about the 12. The 12 teams.
Not
that
12 again. The 12 teams in the CFP.
Right.
Ultimately, it's funny when you look at this season locally from this prism. Both Utah and BYU blew it in different ways.
Yeah, they
did. At one point, we all thought Utah's conference to win. Everybody thought that. Vegas thought it. The media thought it. Anybody who covered college football and speaks into a microphone or writes things down about it had Utah, if not 1, either 2. The lowest I saw was 3. I think one projection had Oklahoma State.
No, they did.
K-State and Utah. The most popular preseason Big 12 championship game pick in Vegas was Utah-Oklahoma State, who went 2-16 in conference.
And does Gundy keep his job, by the way? I guess
that's what we're hearing, that he's going to be back.
He's an alum, and I guess he's earned it. I don't know.
But ultimately, I do wonder whether or not the narrative of having to learn how to play in a new conference is real as it pertains to potential improvement for Utah, because BYU last year, it wasn't great wins and losses wise, but if you listen to anybody who covers BYU, it's like, oh, we were close. All these close games, 1-score games. On the wrong side of it.
Same thing could be said this year.
Last year, but on the right side of it this year after a year of experience in the Big 12. Now, Utah spent a decade in the Pac-12. That's why it's weird for me to believe they need a year to find their footing in a new P4 conference. BYU is independent. They weren't playing P4 football, so it's natural for them to need a year to kind of learn the deal. But do you think there's any meat on that bone? Utah needed a year to understand the Big 12, and now they'll be better next year.
I don't think one bit. This is an injury issue. I mean, when you lose your starting quarterback that you put all of your money on, and you don't have a quarterback room that can make up for that, that's the problem. Who's to say what would have happened if BYU had lost Retzlaff? I don't know how good Bohannon might have been or whoever else down there. I know they like McKay Hillstead for the future, but this is an injury thing. If Cam's healthy the entire season, think of all those close losses that they probably win. That's what I think. So I think it's a whole different dynamic. Same thing last year. Although they went through all those injury issues, they were still in the Pac-12, and Bryson Barnes and the others who helped or transferred led them to an 8-win season. But I think this is much more related to the injury issue. Than an adjustment.
That's 2 straight years of just like catastrophic injuries.
Yes, it is.
It's not just QB. And I just wonder at what point are we looking around going, what's going on here? Like
maybe the trainers.
I honestly don't know.
I don't know.
All I'm saying is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. 2 straight seasons where I'm sure Kyle's looking around like, what do you want me to do? If I'm without a bulk of my best players, we can't compete. At what point do we wonder what the hell's going on with all these injuries?
And yet we circle all the way back to how this conversation started with the idea of Cam coming back. And there's some people that might think that's absolute lunacy. Like, can this 3 years in a row? Yeah. I mean, can this, you never know. But we'll see. Like, you know what? It's a different world now. He can make a lot more money staying here, most likely, than being undrafted in the NFL.
All right. Before we catch a break here, do you have a Jazz thought?
We have a Talking Jazz show tonight, and my thought is these are getting more and more difficult. Here's the thought. Start paying attention to the standings from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Let me throw,
because that's what we're focusing on.
Let me throw a specific one at you instead of asking just generally speaking, because Andy Larson hopped on the show yesterday, and he hit me with a take.
Oh, I heard this.
I don't even know that he's wrong. Yeah. I'm just saying if he's right, it's not great, Bob, as they say. So of the 6 young, and Walker's young too, but he's year 3. Of the 6 players, year 1, year 2, Andy's assertion yesterday is that Kyle Filipowski is the most exciting prospect. And I don't know how to give you my opinion on it without sounding like I'm railing on Kyle.
You're going to.
No, hold on a second. Without sounding like I'm railing on Kyle. But the problem is it's a real indictment on Keontae, and it does indicate that the other picks they made at this point have not shown enough to indicate whether or not this thing is moving in the right direction. I mean, we all do the thing where it's like, look at what Danny did in Boston. Okay, well, for that to happen, a few of his picks had to pop, and they did. It was Tatum, it was Brown, it was Marcus Smart. I could keep going. And if we have 2 years of draft capital and your most exciting player of the 2 years is Kyle Filipowski, that's kind of an indictment on the way you're evaluating talent, if that's the correct thing. And look, it's only 20 games, so we don't know.
Yeah, and also there's the opportunity you're giving him more time. Remember, Rudy Gobert spent a couple seasons bouncing back and forth from the G League team. Adam Mikulich and I were talking about this yesterday with
the GOAT.
By the way, he held a look to the sky. It was after the Laker game.
Oh, I saw it.
It had to have been 3 or 4 seconds.
Oh, I saw it.
Do you think, am I accurate on that?
Yes, it's
maybe 5.
It's wonderful. It's his calling card. I hope he never stops it.
It's like he's looking to the heavens.
And then I love when he does the Dave, you know me, I'm a passionate man. It's like, yes, my guy Mikulich.
He nails it. He's got his shtick.
He does.
Anyway, we're talking about Cody Williams, and the prevailing thought is, hey, at least he's getting more minutes, a lot more minutes, and some quality time, and let's see how that develops. But without going too deep into this is going to be a topic for Talking Jazz tonight. I'm going to put this on you tonight on Talking Jazz, which you're going to see live, well, sort of live.
I'm ready for it.
KMYU tonight, following 2 News at 10.
All right, buddy. You didn't get a text from the stake president or anything during our hit, did you?
I haven't seen anything.
What about Dr. Freestone?
Well, my number is not published. It's
in the church directory?
No.
Shame on you.
What?
Do you have a calling right now?
Yeah.
What is it?
Preschool.
You're teaching
advisor.
Young men?
No, it's an advisor.
That's still too. You're molding the minds of young men.
It's been a while since you've been there. All the kids are the teachers.
To preschool, yes, it's been a while, but about 30 years. Yeah.
That's a new thing. I can't even imagine you trying to get through that. The kids do the teaching.
But my advisors were aged rapidly, trying to keep us in check.
I can imagine.
Okay, well, I hope you're still in good standing by the time you get off air.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay, there he is, Dave Fox. I'll be on TV with Dave
I'll see you
tonight.
Soon.
10:35 KMYU. We call it Talking Jazz. It'll be after the Jazz game tonight, so check it out. Always a good time. All right, we'll catch a break. 5 o'clock hour of the drive comes your way next, right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? 5 o'clock hour of the drive gets rolling right now. It's time for the drive at 5 as you make your commute home on this Tuesday afternoon. It's been a nice day, kind of a warm day for a December Tuesday afternoon, about 47 degrees and clear a little bit earlier. And as it is every day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Going to bring in Tim McMahon coming up in just a little bit. The Jazz are in action tonight. It is their final game of the NBA Cup. Now, they have been eliminated from the NBA Cup, but you still have to play out the schedule. Playing one of the best teams in the NBA, the Oklahoma City Thunder, tonight. Jazz are on the road until after Christmas. They have a big 7-game road trip, and that includes a break for the NBA Cup. So the Jazz will be off when the NBA Cup tournament actually goes down, and hence they're getting a lot of time away from Salt Lake City. They don't return home until a Philadelphia 76er game, I believe, on December the 28th. So Jazz in action tonight. BYU basketball is taking on Providence coming up at 6:30. BYU, really good team this year. That's going to be on FS1 if you want to check it out on television. Utah Hockey Club lost to Dallas last night after coming home from a really, really nice win against Vegas. 5 o'clock hour of the drive tonight is brought to you by Orem Toyota. It's Brent Brown Toyota, which is now Orem Toyota. For over 2 decades, Brent Brown has been a trusted name in Utah County. As Orem Toyota, this legacy continues with a renewed commitment to customer-centered service and active community engagement. All inventory is priced below market value, and they're trying to get it all out. Everything must go. Once-in-a-lifetime clearance event going on until the end of the year. They have expanded inventory, a broader selection of new, certified, and pre-owned vehicles, enhanced service department, personalized customer experience. The all-new Orem Toyota is located at 1400 Sand Hill Road in Orem and online at oremtoyota.com. I've had a fun show today. I've had a lively Tuesday show today. Hopefully you're off to a great start to your work week and enjoying a Tuesday. The current iteration of the CFP rankings are being released as we speak. Top 10 is unfolding right now. Boise State at 10, Indiana at 9. We'll continue to bring these to you as they kind of roll throughout the rest of the rankings. Let you know where BYU came in, some of the Big 12 teams as well. That, of course, still top of mind, even though Utah football is done for the year and BYU has their bowl game in front of them, and that's it. Still very topical when it comes to the world of college football here locally for different reasons. For the University of Utah side of things, we all kind of are waiting on pins and needles for the announcement of, well, first, whether or not Coach Witt will be back. And as we've talked about all day and over the course of the past couple of days, both myself and that with guests as well, my gut tells me Kyle's coming back. I think if he was stepping aside, we would know by now. That's just my feel on the situation. And over the course of his final media sessions over the past 3-4 weeks, as the season was coming to a close and it became clear that they were not going bowling, Kyle just spoke as a guy that's not going out like this. He was very specific about the things they need to do this offseason, and just struck me as a guy that's looking to come back. And he still has a few years left on that contract, and I still think has a lot of juice left in him. So that's number one. Number two, we're all waiting on the announcement of who the offensive coordinator will be. Nothing official as of today. Nothing official has come down just yet. Of course, we have signing day and then transfer portal as well. Already a bunch of rumors about Utah maybe flipping some players. As of right now, they have not really lost anybody. Jalen Glover left the team prior to the end of the season. He has hit the transfer portal. But as of right now, that's it for Utah. BYU's lost a couple of players. We'll get to some of that coming up later on in the show. But, of course, BYU's still kind of waiting to figure out what that bowl is going to look like. Kyle Bonagura hopped on the show earlier today. Kyle does all of the bowl projections for ESPN. And as of now, he has Brigham Young playing Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. That would be December the 28th. So that's probably the most likely landing spot for BYU and their bowl aspirations. But for BYU, there's still football left to be played. And for Utah, there are a lot of questions to answer at the beginning of ultimately one of the most important off seasons that this program has ever had. And, of course, the offseason includes potential changes to the coaching staff. The offseason includes potential infusion of talent via transfer portal. And then, of course, players signing, committing to play for the University of Utah. Some news broke right before we went on air today that Noah Fafita has hit the transfer portal, quarterback from Arizona, who had a phenomenal year 2 years ago and was just okay last year. Arizona really struggled all year long. Noah is a talent. And, of course, a lot of this depends on who the offensive coordinator is and the type of football he wants to play, and whether or not Noah is the type of quarterback that would fit that approach. Now, Noah Fafita is going to have no shortage of suitors when it comes to the transfer portal in college football. And the question for the University of Utah simply is there the answer under center already in the quarterback room? From my vantage point, I would say no, question mark. And the question mark, of course, is pertaining to another piece of news that maybe we'll learn quickly. Maybe we won't learn for quite some time. Coach Witt himself, during a media availability, when asked about Cameron Rising, said that the decision will be his and his alone. So what does that mean if Cam decides that he wants to come back? If Cam knocks on Coach Witt's door and then sits across from him and says, I've decided that I'm coming back for an 8th year, that's my desire. That's what I want to do. What is Kyle's reaction? Does he simply open the door and say, yes, you're part of our family, please come back? And I'm conflicted on this, quite honestly, because there were a lot of conversations last offseason, and I don't know how much of this was valid. A lot of conversations last offseason that as a result of Cam coming back, there were plenty of quarterback options that Utah had their eye on that did not want to simply enroll at Utah and Salt Lake City and sit behind Cam. Like if he's entrenched as your starter, if you know he's the guy, we'll use Noah Fafita just as an example because he's topical and made news today. Would Noah elect to go elsewhere because he knows Cam is the guy? Or is there enough of an open competition as a result of Cam's inability to stay healthy that you can sell that to a quarterback prospect like Noah, who has 2 years left to play, by the way? And look, the model of simply hiring a hired gun for a year or two in college football has proven to be very effective across the landscape of some of the best teams in the nation, including Oregon, right? And so I don't think anybody is ready to either anoint or dismiss Isaac Wilson. I certainly am not. That young man was put in a very, very difficult situation at the age of 18, an early enrollee in April, where he went from trying to read Farmington secondary to Big 12 secondaries at the drop of a hat. It was an unfair ask. So I am not putting it on his shoulders. I'm just being real about the data that we have at our disposal and what it looked like when Isaac was under center. He himself would tell you it wasn't good enough, and I think Utah football understands that. Brandon Rose continues to be the guy out there that, like, when he actually got a little run, it looked pretty good at times and maybe looked a little bit better than it did with Isaac. Maybe Brandon should have been the guy. Neither here nor there. Do you feel like you have the solution under center in the quarterback room right now? What does the impending decision made by Cam Rising mean for that? And only time will tell. I was expecting to hear some news about either Coach Witt or the OC either yesterday or today. My guess is we won't have to wait too much longer. It's not some hyperbolic statement to say this needs to be locked in sooner rather than later. I would imagine a lot of transfer portal prospects or potential college players coming out of high school just want to know what the deal is. Now, that leads me to repeat something I've said all day today. I have a hard time believing that those people that are in the room, those people that are actually on a need-to-know basis in a way that we're not as media members or fans of the game, they have to already know. It just doesn't strike me as something Kyle would do to kind of string people along. I think ultimately he wants to make sure the program's in the best place possible, whether he's the head coach or it's Morgan. And in order to do that, continuity, great, but at least announcing your intention so you understand what direction you're taking as you talk to these young players to try to get them to commit to play for the University of Utah. So that's kind of the deal with the Utes as of now, even though the offseason technically is upon us. There are plenty of storylines regarding Utah football that we'll continue to cover and talk about here on the program. And a lot of college football still left to be played. Of course, there is bowl season, and there's this expanded 12-team CFP that a lot of people are excited for. But conference championship weekend coming up still has a lot of implications. Starting on Friday, it's UNLV, Boise State, in essentially a play-in game for the CFP. Boise at this point is a 4-point favorite, and two good football teams going at it. Tulane and Army play coming up on Friday as well. That's in West Point for the American Athletic Championship. Big 12 turn on Saturday morning. It's Iowa State and it's Arizona State. And that ultimately also a play-in game. The Big 12, as most people believed, all year long. a one-bid league, period, end of story. As of now, Arizona State is a slight favorite. In that one, they're a 2-point favorite over Iowa State. Georgia, Texas, for all the marbles in the SEC. Penn State gets in the Big Ten championship as a result of Ohio State blowing it once again as they lost to Michigan for the fourth straight time. This time as a 21-point favorite, a 3-touchdown favorite. Couldn't get it done. Penn State gets in. Oregon, a 3.5-point favorite. And as a result of Miami losing to Syracuse, Clemson now gets the invite down in Charlotte for the ACC championship game against SMU. All right, no surprise with the CFP bracket as far as the top goes. Oregon comes in at number 1. Texas comes in at number 2. Penn State is 3. Notre Dame 4. Georgia at 5. As of right now, it looks like – no, excuse me. That's Notre Dame in at 4. Georgia at 5. These are the seedings, not the rankings, which are two different things. Miami out. First team out is Miami. Second team out, Ole Miss. And Alabama is at 11. I'm digesting this in real time, so stick with me. We talked about this earlier with Kyle. He said the number one question is, what would the CFP do with Miami? Well, they dropped him out. And even though Bama has 3 losses, they're in. And people are going to be mad about that. But as we talk about on this show all the time, you can get upset at brand bias in college football, but it's real and it's not new. And with all things being equal, powerful television executives they want you to watch their TV show. That's their job. They do wield power behind the scenes. And yes, Alabama, according to the latest CFP rankings in the projected bracket, would play Notre Dame in round 1. Arizona State would play Penn State. The winner of that would play Boise. So Boise, as the Mountain West champ, is going to get that top 4 seed that would have gone to a better Big 12 champ. So kind of a surprise that Miami has been left out based off of some of the projections, some of the things people were talking about earlier today as the latest iteration of the CFP rankings have been released. Chaos in college football all year long. I have to say, I'm not envious of the CFP committee. Their job seems to be somewhat impossible, but they do seem to change their criteria week in and week out. I always get a kick out of the fact that they march one poor dude up there after the ranking to answer these questions, and it just doesn't seem like there's a ton of consistency. I'm a fan of the 12-team thing, but as we always talked about, okay, as soon as it expanded, the argument would change from, okay, top 4, who's 5, 6, 7, to, okay, top 12, who's 13, 14, 15. We're still going to complain about the teams that were left out. We're still going to make a case for the teams that we feel like have a resume that should be looked at a little more closely. I do think the cruel reality for Brigham Young is it wasn't just the 2 losses. It was when it happened. And ultimately, Kansas, while they improved at the end of the year with wins over Colorado and some other good performances, 13 points at home in that spot, and then losing to ASU. It's a good team, but, it was the timing of those losses combined with the underperformance of what did turn out to be nothing more than an average football conference has doomed the Big 12 to only get one in, and it certainly will be simply the winner of the conference championship game coming up in Dallas. In action tonight, and there's a lot of good NBA storylines. Two other teams of note, Colorado jumps a couple of spots up to number 23. And again, making that potential BYU-Colorado Alamo Bowl matchup pretty intriguing, be one of the better non-CFP bowl games. Iowa State rolls in at 16, Arizona State at 15. The big news is Miami, after their loss to Syracuse, has fallen behind Alabama, a 3-loss team. Alabama is in as of now as the number 11 team, and the only scenario in play, that would allow Bama to drop, I believe, is an upset in the ACC championship game if Clemson beats SMU. And then potentially that would drop Bama. But it looks like for the 9th time in 11 seasons, Alabama is going to be involved in the CFP, even though they have 3 losses. Ole Miss with 3 losses at 13, South Carolina at 14 at 9-3. Top 4, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame. The byes as of now would go to Oregon, Texas, as well as potentially Georgia, and I do believe Boise State would get that 4th bye. Now, if UNLV upsets Boise State, then the winner of Arizona State, Iowa State would probably hop into that top 4, therefore giving the Big 12 champ a first-round bye. I think that's the deal. Hopefully I didn't confuse everybody to end the show. Any surprises for you as far as this? I mean, people are going to be mad about Bama in and Miami out, but that's probably the main topic as of now.
I mean, that's the one that stands out, but to me, I'm with it. Alabama would beat Miami by 25 points, I think. And I don't mean to disrespect Miami, and I'm not the upset Virginia Tech fan who knows that Miami should have lost at least 3 or 4 games by now this year if it weren't for some, I would say, clever operating in the replay booths in ACC land. And listen, we've gone into conspiracy world with refs and whatnot a lot this year, but the ACC Miami stuff was wild early on in the season, and the one that I point to the most with that stuff. And I think Bama's a better team, and ultimately that is what we're going to try to find out with this tournament. But that's probably the one that stands out as at least the biggest argument you can have. Now, I've seen people that are talking about Boise State being above the Big 12 schools, and to me that is a silly argument. That means you've been watching too much Big 12 football and not enough Boise State football. They've lost 1 game all year long, Spence, and it's to the number 1 team in the country by a field goal. Boise State is very close to being not only unbeaten, but unbeaten with a win over Oregon. They should not only be in the top 10, they should be firmly in the playoff picture right now. And the kind of hand-wringing I've seen about Boise being too elevated is silly, in my opinion.
Let me clear something up. The first-round buys would actually look like this based off the current CFP bracket projection. Oregon is the 1 seed out of the Big Ten. Texas as the 2 seed out of the SEC. SMU as the 3 seed out of the ACC. And then, as Porter just referenced, the projections have Boise in as a top 4 seed. If UNLV upsets Boise, the winner of Arizona State, Iowa State will grab that top 4 seed and get a bye. As of now, the first-round matchups would be Arizona State, Penn State, Tennessee, Ohio State, Bama, Notre Dame, Indiana, and Georgia. There you go. All right, Porter, let's get out of here. Got to get to television with our guy, Dave Fox. What comes our way on a Wednesday edition of the show?
Yeah, man, on a Wednesday edition of The Drive, we'll recap a little bit more, talk some college football with one Bill Riley, the voice of the Utes, of course, recapping the Big 12 season that was and talking some offseason. And, hey, talking some hoops as well with Bill Riley. Richard Smitty Smith stops by the program. He'll be here in studio talking hoops with us. Zach Harper for your NBA Daily Assist. And then Ali Mata of Utah Hockey Club, just named to the Finnish national team. And, of course, in the midst of the inaugural Utah Hockey Club season, we'll get some word from a standout player on Utah Hockey Club.
All right, so join us for a Wednesday edition of the show. And with that, we'll say goodnight for this Tuesday show. And a special thank you to Kyle Bonagura, Tim McMahon, Matt Brown, and Dave Fox for any of the sound you may have missed from the show. Always have the website at your disposal, which is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to check out our station app. It's how I listen to our station. The ESPN 700 app is available for free in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space, 4 hours every afternoon, check out our podcast page. We call it The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, give us all the stars. It actually helps us out. That's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Tuesday evening. Talk to you on a Wednesday drive. As always, you can find it right here